My name's Rayhan. I'm 27 now, and I just finished medical school. Saying that sentence out loud still feels surreal, like I'm lying. It doesn't roll off my tongue easily, not because I doubt myself, but because I spent the last decade being told I wouldn't make it. Not by professors or friends, but by my own family. I'm the middle child. My older sister, Layla, is the golden one, married at 24, 2 kids by 28, and a real estate business she inherited from our uncle. My younger brother, Adam, was the surprise baby that got doted on like a prince while I quietly drowned in library books and night shifts at the local ER. My parents, my mom especially, never had time for my ambition. Doctors are miserable, she used to say when I brought up the idea at 14. Why would you choose that kind of life? You'll burn out before 30. Still, I pushed through. I wasn't looking for their approval, not anymore, but part of me had always hoped that maybe, just maybe, when I graduated, when I walked across that stage in my white coat, they'd be there. That they'd see me and finally say something close to, "We're proud of you." But no, they missed it. All of it. The ceremony was last month. I invited them months in advance, sent them a detailed itinerary, even booked a hotel room near campus just in case they forgot. But the week before, my mom called me while I was grabbing lunch between rotations. "Rayhan," she said, her voice bright and breezy like it always is before she drops something cold. "We won't be able to make it, honey. We're going on a cruise. Your dad and I planned it ages ago." I remember just standing there, half a sandwich in my hand, not even chewing anymore. "A cruise?" I asked, blinking. "You're missing my graduation for a cruise?" There was a pause, then a laugh. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. It's not like this is a surprise. We didn't really think you'd make it anyway." That sentence hit like a punch to the ribs. I don't even know if she meant it to sound cruel. Maybe that was just how she thought. Like I was always the one teetering on failure, barely holding on. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just swallowed it and said, "Then don't bother showing up to the ceremony next month either." She didn't even ask what ceremony. Just mumbled something about sunscreen and hung up. The actual graduation was bittersweet. My best friend Javier's parents brought me flowers, hugged me like I was their own son, and took a dozen photos. I smiled in every one. But there was this ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. This strange, hollow feeling that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with being invisible to the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I didn't expect anything to come from that moment. Honestly, I figured it would be another notch on the long list of times they failed to show up. But then something happened 3 days later. It was a Sunday morning, and I was trying to sleep in for the first time in weeks when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Layla. No caption, just a photo. I opened it, bleary-eyed, and sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone. It was a picture of a billboard, a massive one. My face was on it, wearing the white coat I'd worn on graduation day. It was a hospital campaign. I'd volunteered with them for years, and apparently, they chose me as part of their new Faces of the Future ad series. My name was printed in bold underneath, with the words Dr. Rayhan Ali, local hero, global hope. My heart stopped for a second. I stared at it in disbelief. Then I read the text Layla sent right after. "You're famous now, huh? Guess mom and dad should have stayed off that boat." I didn't know what to feel. Pride? Bitterness? Satisfaction? All of it hit at once. But what really shook me was the flood of missed calls that came in over the next few hours. All from my parents. My dad called first, then my mom, then both, over and over again. I didn't answer. Not the first time, not the fifth. Later that evening, I listened to one voicemail, just one. It was my mom. Her voice wasn't bright anymore. It was thin, uncertain. "Rayhan, we saw the billboard. Your uncle sent a photo too. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you? Why didn't you say anything? Call us, please." I didn't call. Instead, I sat on my bed and stared at my framed diploma, remembering every late night I spent studying while Layla hosted another family dinner I wasn't invited to. I remembered the Christmas they left me at home because Adam wanted to go skiing and there wasn't enough room. I remembered every time my mom rolled her eyes when I said I couldn't come to a wedding because of an exam. Every single time I chose responsibility over celebration, and how no one ever noticed. A week passed before I got a knock on my apartment door. It was Adam. He stood there looking awkward, holding a bag of cookies like that somehow made things okay. "Mom sent these," he mumbled. "She thought you might. I don't know. Want to talk?" I let him in. We sat in silence for a while. Then he looked at me and said, "She's freaking out, man. Like, crying and everything. She didn't know it'd be such a big deal." I almost laughed. Didn't know what would be a big deal? That her son became a doctor? Or that she skipped the one moment that mattered? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me another photo, one that hadn't been sent to me. It was of my mom, standing in front of the billboard, sunglasses on, but clearly crying. "She took this yesterday," he said. "She stood there for like an hour." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. The wound was still too fresh, the years too long, the silence too heavy. And that's when the invitation came. An envelope in the mail. White. Formal. From my med school. An exclusive ceremony for select graduates being honored at the City Gala next month, recognized for their research, community service, and academic excellence. I had been selected. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote down the names of the 3 guests I was allowed to invite. But I didn't send it to my parents. And that's when the real pressure began. The first message came from my mom again. This time, it was a text, carefully worded like she'd typed and deleted it a dozen times. "We heard about the ceremony next month. Your cousin Tarek mentioned it. Is there a way we can attend? We'd love to support you this time. Truly, support me this time." As if all the other times had been what? Practice rounds? I didn't reply. I spent the week pretending to forget the message. In truth, I reread it every night before bed, heart tightening with that familiar cocktail of hope and hurt. The kind of hurt that only comes from family, the kind you can't explain to someone who hasn't lived it. It wasn't just about them missing the graduation. It was about all of it. Years of being second best, of hearing Layla's closing on another property while my residency interview got a half nod, of my mom telling people I was just studying something in medicine like it was a hobby and not my entire life. They dismissed me for so long. They genuinely believed they could waltz back into my story now that the ending looked impressive. But the thing is, I wasn't a side character anymore. Not in my life. Not in anyone's. A few days later, Layla called, which surprised me more than anything. Layla rarely called anyone unless she needed something notarized or babysitting. She didn't even say hello when I picked up. "You're really not inviting them?" she asked. "Nice to hear from you too." She sighed, like I was being unreasonable for wanting her to treat me like a human being. "Mom is going crazy, Rayhan. She's talking about flying in early and waiting outside the event if she has to. She's been calling everyone in the family to ask if they got an invite so she can show up as their +1. I sat back, staring at the ceiling. So you're seriously going to let her embarrass herself like that?" Layla snapped. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth is, I'd spent most of my life avoiding doing things that would embarrass our mother. I kept my mouth shut at dinners, let her take credit for things she had no hand in, and swallowed years of disappointment to keep the peace. But something had shifted after that graduation, after that billboard, after hearing her say, "We didn't think you'd actually make it." I was tired of protecting someone who never once protected me. So I told Layla, maybe it's time she understands what it feels like. She didn't respond. Not really. Just mumbled something about family should come first and hung up. But family didn't come first when they booked that cruise. Family didn't come first when I got accepted into med school and my mom said, "Don't get your hopes up." Family didn't come first when I was hospitalized from exhaustion last winter and no one visited. What came first was convenience, image, control. So no, I didn't send them an invite. Instead, I invited Dr. Patel, my first attending physician, who taught me how to make decisions under pressure. I invited Javier's mom, who once packed me lunches during exam week. And I invited Mr. Thompson, the elderly patient I used to visit every Thursday during clinicals, who always said, "You're going to be someone, kid," even when I didn't believe it myself. And with every decision I made for that ceremony, I felt something in me settle. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it for the version of me that sat alone on graduation day while strangers clapped. For the version of me who looked up from textbooks in the middle of the night wondering if anyone would care if I made it. About a week before the event, my dad showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning, just a knock on the door. I opened it, and there he was, holding a bouquet of wilted flowers like he'd grabbed them from a gas station 5 minutes ago. His face was tired, older than I remembered, but his voice was still the same, firm, even when uncertain. "Can we talk?" I let him in. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the silence between us thicker than the air in July. I didn't come to fight, he said. I came to apologize. I looked up, surprised. He cleared his throat. Your mother and I, we didn't know how to support you. You were always different. Quiet. Driven. And instead of learning how to be there for you, we pretended you didn't need us. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the flowers, slowly shedding petals on the table. You have every right to be angry, he continued. But I'm asking you, not as your father, but as a man who failed, please let us come to the ceremony. I wanted to say yes. I did. But there was something inside me still knotted. Something still bruised. I'm not angry, I said softly. I'm just tired of pretending that nothing happened. He nodded slowly, as if he expected that. We'll wait outside then. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. He stood up, left the flowers, and walked out. The next morning, I got another text. From an unknown number this time. Look what I saw today. You're amazing. Attached was another photo of the billboard. Only this time, someone had taken a selfie in front of it. That's when I realized something had changed. People weren't just seeing me, they were recognizing me. The billboard had gone a little viral. A few local news stations did segments. Social media was sharing my story. I was being asked to speak at community centers, schools, hospitals, and suddenly, my family wasn't the only one calling. But they were the only ones who'd gone silent again. No more calls. No more texts. Until the night before the ceremony. That's when my mom sent one last message. We're outside. We don't have tickets. We just want to see you walk in. We're sorry, Rayhan. We truly are. And that's where I stood. In the back hallway of the grand auditorium, wearing the suit I bought with my first hospital paycheck, holding the program in my hand. I could see the doors from where I stood. I could walk out and greet them. I could wave. I could invite them in. Or I could walk the other way. I stood there frozen, staring at that final message on my phone screen, the glow casting a soft light across my hand as murmurs of arriving guests echoed from the lobby. The program in my other hand felt heavier than paper should, like it was soaked in everything I'd been through just to get to this night. There was a strange stillness in the hallway, a tension in the air that made every breath feel like a choice. In the distance, I could hear the low hum of a string quartet warming up, the soft clinks of champagne glasses, and faint laughter echoing through the doors. But all I could think about was that text. They're outside. Suddenly, I was 14 again, standing at the kitchen table with my acceptance letter to the pre-med summer program, heart thudding as I showed it to my mom, only for her to say, "Do you know how expensive that is?" and walk away. I was 17, sitting on the steps of the school auditorium after my science fair win, alone, because no one came to see the presentation. I was 21, crying silently in the library restroom during finals week, while my siblings texted me photos from a beach vacation I wasn't invited to. And now, I was 27, with the power to decide who got a seat in my story. I didn't move right away. Instead, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. The quiet gave me space to think, space I hadn't had during med school or in the whirlwind after the billboard went up. I thought about Javier's mom, who was already inside, dressed in soft gold, telling every stranger around her, "That one's mine. I don't care what the blood test says." I thought about Mr. Thompson, who'd shown up in a charcoal blazer with a little flower tucked into his lapel, asking if he looked doctor-worthy. And then I thought about my parents, standing somewhere outside those double doors in the summer heat, waiting, not because they believed in me, but because now the world did. There was a knock on the hallway door behind me. A young event coordinator peeked in, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Ali, they're ready for you." I nodded and straightened my jacket. "I'll be right there." She smiled politely and disappeared down the corridor. My footsteps echoed softly as I made my way down the back hall and into the green room, where a small monitor displayed the entrance and lobby. I paused, curiosity getting the better of me. There they were, my parents. My mom in a lavender dress, clutching her purse with white knuckles. My dad beside her, arms crossed, looking down every few seconds like he couldn't keep eye contact with the room itself. Neither of them spoke. They just waited. I noticed something strange then. They weren't just standing there. They looked nervous, like two people hoping to be forgiven, but bracing for the fact that they might not be. I felt the tightness in my chest again, but this time, it was different. Less like anger, more like gravity. This was the moment I had waited for my entire life, and not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I finally had the choice they had denied me for years. The choice to be seen, or to walk past them unseen. I stepped away from the monitor and into the main prep room, where each honoree was being introduced in order. They called Dr. Lang first. She developed a low-cost diagnostic test for a regional virus. Then Dr. Rivera, who built a mobile clinic during her final year. Then came my name. Dr. Rehan Ali, recipient of the Community Healthcare Award, honored for his outreach work, clinical excellence, and top 1% placement nationally. Applause. And then silence, as everyone turned toward the side entrance, where I was to walk through the audience, onto the stage, and take my place. I stepped forward into the hallway, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something sharper. I rounded the corner and paused. Through the large glass entry doors across the lobby, I could see them. My mom spotted me first. She stepped forward with a small wave, hesitant, trembling. I stopped mid-step. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but I couldn't hear her. And she couldn't hear me. There was only the thick pane of glass between us, both transparent and impenetrable. We locked eyes. It was the first time in years I'd looked at her that long. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I didn't move. My dad joined her a moment later. He didn't say anything, just looked at me like he wanted to, like he was trying to understand who I had become and wondering when the son he had overlooked became the man now standing on the other side of success. I watched for a few seconds more. Then I slowly turned, not away from them, but toward the auditorium doors. I walked through. The applause picked up again as I entered. I didn't look back. I didn't have to, because for once, the room wasn't behind me. It was before me. I took my place on stage, my name echoing through the speakers. I could feel the lights warming my shoulders, the gentle hush as the next speaker began, and the distant knowledge that somewhere behind those doors, the two people who missed the beginning of my journey were now watching the part they were never invited to. But just as I began to sit down, I felt a shift ripple through the audience. A murmur, a rustle of surprise, a subtle turning of heads, and then a commotion at the back entrance. The commotion started as a whisper, nothing dramatic at first, just the squeak of a door opening when it shouldn't have, followed by a quiet shuffle of footsteps. I didn't turn around immediately. I sat still, spine straight, hands resting in my lap as the host introduced the next honoree. But I could feel the shift in energy. The kind of shift that comes when someone enters a space where they're not expected or wanted. Then I heard the unmistakable click of my mother's heels. I knew that sound. Knew it from childhood afternoons in department stores, when she'd pace impatiently near the dressing rooms. Knew it from late nights when she'd come home from dinner parties and walk right past my room without knocking. And now, those same footsteps were echoing through this sacred, polished hall like a quiet storm. I turned slowly. There she was. My mother stood at the back of the room, scanning the crowd until her eyes found mine. She looked different under the stage lights, smaller. Not the towering figure I remembered from childhood, but a woman trying to hold herself together under the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. My dad was beside her, his expression unreadable. He wasn't pushing forward, wasn't trying to make a scene. But my mom, she was moving. She took one cautious step forward, then another. A few heads turned. A couple people whispered. An usher appeared at her side and said something. I couldn't hear it, but she didn't stop. She just kept walking, slow and deliberate, clutching her purse like a lifeline. And then she did something that froze me. She stopped in the center aisle, halfway between the door and the stage, and sat down. She didn't try to come closer. She didn't wave or call my name. She simply sat down in an empty chair as if to say, I missed your beginning, but I'm here now. And I'm not moving. There was a part of me, maybe the younger version of me, that wanted to get up, that wanted to storm out and slam the door behind me. But I didn't. I just watched her for a long moment, the tension in my chest melting into something harder to define. Because no matter how much she had hurt me, no matter how many birthdays or milestones she had missed, this moment, it was new and complicated and somehow quieter than I thought it would be. I turned back to the stage as the host wrapped up the final introduction. Let's give one more round of applause for our honorees, future leaders, healers, and pioneers. The room filled with applause again, louder this time, the kind that resonates in your chest. I stood with the others and took my bow, and when I looked out over the crowd, I saw her still sitting there, clapping. My dad sitting beside her, a little stiff, but present. After the ceremony, guests mingled in the reception area, A beautifully lit garden space strung with fairy lights and soft jazz. People congratulated me, asked for photos, introduced me to colleagues and donors and former patients who recognized my name from the billboard. Javier's mom found me and nearly crushed me in a hug. "I told you," she said, eyes shining. "I always knew you'd make it." I smiled and hugged her back, heart full in a way I hadn't expected. These were my people. The ones who had seen me when it was hard to be seen. I was about to grab a glass of champagne when I saw them. My parents stood at the far edge of the garden, near the stone fountain. They weren't approaching anyone. They weren't laughing or mingling like they used to at family weddings. They looked out of place, like two guests who hadn't RSVP'd but came anyway, hoping the host wouldn't turn them away. Part of me wanted to ignore them, let them feel what I had felt, what it was like to be excluded. But another part of me, the part that had spent years waiting for an apology that never came, felt something else entirely. Exhaustion. Not from anger, but from carrying it. I walked over. They didn't notice me right away. My mom was nervously picking at the strap of her purse. My dad was staring at the koi fish in the fountain like they might have an answer for what to say. When I reached them, I stopped a few feet away and crossed my arms. "You weren't on the guest list." They both turned. My mom's eyes were red. Not fresh crying, but close. My dad looked like he'd aged 5 years since I last saw him in person. "I know," she said softly. We couldn't not come." "You didn't come to my graduation?" I said. She flinched. "I know. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. And you didn't think I'd make it." Her lip trembled. I was wrong. The words hung there, suspended in the night air. My dad finally spoke. "We didn't know how to raise someone like you. You were always so focused, so determined. And we didn't understand it. So we made it small. Made you small. Because it made us feel less guilty for not trying harder." He looked away. "We failed you," he added. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just stood there and let the silence work on them the way their silence had worked on me. Then I said, "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this for me." My mom nodded slowly. "We know." I exhaled. "I'll be moving soon," I said. "I got a fellowship in another state." They both looked surprised, then proud, then disappointed all at once. Will we still hear from you?" my mom asked, hesitant. I paused. "I don't know yet." And it was the most honest thing I could say. Because forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a long walk. And sometimes you stop walking. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally realize you've been walking alone. They nodded. They didn't beg. They didn't press. They just stood there and let the silence be what it was. I left them by the fountain and walked back into the light. That night, as I lay in bed with my suit jacket draped over a chair and the award plaque resting on my desk, I thought about everything they'd said and everything they hadn't. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I needed their approval or apology to justify the road I'd taken. I had made it. Not in spite of them, but without them. And that was enough. I'm Jake, 32, and if there's one thing I've always believed in, it's family. Not in the corny, sitcom way, but in that quiet, sturdy kind of loyalty you build over decades. I never expected applause for it. I just showed up. When Dad's back gave out, and he couldn't do roofing anymore, I covered the mortgage. When Mom needed a new car, but couldn't get the loan on her own, I co-signed. Paid half the monthly without being asked. I've paid for vet bills, groceries, the occasional emergency root canal for my sister. I never made a big deal out of it. That's just what you do for the people you love. At least, that's what I thought. It's not like I don't have my own life. I've worked hard, climbed the ladder in IT, finally bought a little place of my own in the next town over. But I've always been the one who drops everything when there's a problem. And the truth is, I liked being needed. It made all the sacrifices, the skipped vacations, the delayed retirement fund, feel worth it. But this past Thanksgiving, that shattered something I didn't know could break. It started with a group text from Mom about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. "Hey guys," she wrote. "Just wanted to say this year will be a little different. Things are tight. We're all exhausted, and we thought it might be best to skip the big gathering. Just a quiet one at home. Hope that's okay." I remember staring at my phone in the middle of my lunch break. My first thought was, fair enough. Things were tight. Inflation, job worries, all that. And I'd rather they be honest than throw a party they couldn't afford. I replied with a simple, "Of course. Hope you both get some rest. Let me know if you need anything." And that was that. Or so I thought. Thanksgiving Day came. I didn't cook, Just microwaved something from Trader Joe's and watched a nature documentary. Kind of pathetic, but I wasn't going to guilt trip anyone. I texted Mom a quick, "Happy Thanksgiving" that morning. She sent back a heart emoji and "love you." No red flags. No weird tone. Then around 9 p.m., I opened Instagram. I wasn't looking for anything. Just bored, scrolling. And that's when I saw it. My cousin Liv, who I'm not even especially close to, had posted a video. A long one. It started with her panning across the living room. Laughing, wine glasses, kids running around in socks. Then it cut to the kitchen. Uncle Dean carving a massive golden brown turkey, and my sister holding up a pie, saying, "Mom made the crust from scratch this time." The final shot? A banner hanging above the entryway. "Family only, thankful together." I just stared at it. My brain couldn't even process what I was seeing. I played it back. Twice. 3 times. There was Mom, laughing with Aunt Jody. Dad, handing out plates. Even my co-worker, Brian, who married into our family 2 years ago. He was there, holding a baby I didn't even know had been born. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. I didn't even feel angry at first. Just hollow. Like I'd missed a call that would have changed my life. Like I'd been erased. I didn't message anyone. Didn't call. Just turned my phone over, laid on my couch, and stared at the ceiling until it got dark. The next morning, I had to snap out of it. Work doesn't stop just because you feel like a ghost. I kept it together until Monday. That's when the text came. "Hey sweetheart," Mom wrote. "Any chance you could help with the mortgage this month? We're short because the water heater broke and it's been one thing after another. Just until January. Love you." I didn't answer right away. I sat there rereading it. The gall of it. After everything. After that night. I went back to Liv's video. It had racked up comments by then. "Best night ever. Thanks for hosting, Aunt Kay. Such a beautiful night with the whole fam." I even found a photo on Facebook. Everyone around the table holding hands. The caption, "Nothing matters more than family." That was when the hurt started turning into something else. I screenshotted the message. I opened up my notes app and typed, "Ask the family you chose." And that's what I sent her. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I didn't. Not at first. It felt like I'd lit a match and tossed it into a room I'd spent years building. But I didn't stop there. I logged into the payment portal, the one I used every month to automatically cover their mortgage, ever since Dad lost his job, and canceled it. I pulled out of the auto pay on their car insurance. The joint card? Frozen. Not closed. Not yet. But inactive. I didn't leave a note. I didn't warn anyone. By the next morning, the calls began. 3 from Mom. 1 from Dad. Then a string of texts from my sister. Did something happen? Why are they freaking out? Can you call Mom, please? I didn't reply. Then I got a message from my cousin Brian, of all people. "Hey man, sorry if you're mad about the dinner. I thought you were coming late or something. We didn't know." And that was the moment I realized something even more gutting. They'd known. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Not a scheduling error. They chose not to tell me. And that banner, "Family only," that wasn't just decor. That was the whole point. The fallout was just beginning. And I hadn't even said a word. By Friday, my voicemail inbox was full. Most of them were from Mom. Her voice started off cheerful, then confused, then increasingly desperate. "Jake, can you please call me? Sweetheart, I don't understand what's happening. Are you okay? Did something happen at work?" Then the one that finally hit the limit. "Jake, your father just found out about the canceled payment. We had no idea. If this is about Thanksgiving, I can explain." But that was just it. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want to hear some awkward excuse about capacity limits, or you were too far away, or we didn't think you'd want to come. There was no explanation that made the decision sting less. They'd excluded me. On purpose. They had gathered everyone they considered family and drawn a line. I just hadn't realized I was on the other side of it. Saturday evening, my sister called. Her third try that day. I picked up. "Jake, thank God, are you okay?" I paused. "Depends. Are you calling because you're worried about me, or because the utilities are in my name?" She was silent for a beat. "What happened? Why is everyone freaking out? You tell me. You were at dinner, right? The one with the banner." Her voice faltered. I didn't know you weren't invited. I thought maybe you were busy or didn't feel like coming." "Right?" I said, my voice flat. Because when I'm not invited to something, my first instinct is to assume I just didn't feel like being there. She went quiet. Then, "It wasn't personal. You know how Mom is. She gets weird about planning. And I think they were trying to keep it small. I let out a laugh. Not a joyful one. A dry, bitter little chuckle. There were 47 people there, Sarah. 47. Including Brian's new baby. Including Aunt June, who lives 3 hours away and hates driving at night. Including your ex-boyfriend's dog, for some reason. But not me. I'm sorry, she said quickly, like the words were burning her tongue. I didn't know. I swear. I believe you, I said quietly. But I don't forgive them. I hung up. Sunday morning came with a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, Mom. Dressed in a wrinkled cardigan, holding a small Tupperware container. The look on her face was strange, part guilty, part tired, part like she wasn't sure what kind of Jake she was about to meet on the other side of the door. I didn't open it. I stood there, watching. She knocked again, then called out, "Honey, I brought you leftovers. Turkey, your favorite." I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. She stayed there for maybe a minute longer. Then I heard her footsteps retreating. She left the Tupperware at my door. It stayed there until Monday morning, when the super knocked and asked if I wanted him to toss it. I nodded. By then, I had already spoken to the bank. The house was technically still in my name. The automatic payments I'd been making for the past year weren't required. They were kindness. Loyalty. A silent promise I thought was mutual. But kindness unreciprocated eventually rots into something bitter. So I made a few more calls. Disconnected a few more things. I didn't post anything. Didn't rant on Facebook. Didn't send a dramatic email to the family thread. I just withdrew. Quietly. Cleanly. The same way they had excluded me. Without yelling. Without warning. Tuesday evening, Dad finally called. I let it ring twice, then answered. His voice was tight. Controlled. "Jake, your mother's worried sick." "About the mortgage?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "About you." The hesitation was thick. "We thought you were okay with a quiet Thanksgiving. You even said." I said I understood. I cut in. "Because you told me nothing was happening. Because you said you were too tired, too tight on money. Not, we're throwing a huge dinner and excluding our son. You didn't tell me the truth. You told everyone else." There was silence on the line. Then a long sigh. We didn't want drama. I felt something in me snap. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. But I said, coldly, "Well, you got silence instead. Congratulations." I hung up before he could reply. That was the last time I picked up a call from any of them that week. By the end of the month, the fallout was in full swing. Dad emailed me a list of due bills. Mom texted a photo of the broken water heater. My cousin Brian, suddenly the family spokesperson, messaged me with, "Hey, they're struggling. Any chance you could talk to them again?" But I was done talking. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing in to fix everything. I wasn't wiring money, driving over, or making quiet sacrifices while everyone else carved turkey and smiled under a banner I wasn't meant to see. They had drawn the line. All I did was finally recognize it. And by then, it was too late to cross back. The real chaos hadn't even started yet. By the second week of December, it was no longer just awkward tension or guilty texts. It was panic. The kind of silent, growing dread that leaks through every message, like they knew the walls were closing in but still couldn't bring themselves to say what needed to be said. I disabled the utilities portal, but I left the access trail clean so they'd know exactly who turned off the heat. The gas bill had bounced. The internet was out. And Dad, proud as he was, had still not admitted to any of it out loud. Instead, they kept dancing around the truth, sending me updates about the cold, the Wi-Fi acting up, and passive-aggressive mentions of tight times. I read each message with an odd sense of detachment, like I was watching a stranger's life unravel on a security camera feed. Maybe that sounds cruel, but for once, I wasn't carrying their problems. I was just observing them. Around December 12th, my Aunt Jody, one of the few family members who'd always been relatively neutral, reached out. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to hear what version of the story was floating around the family grapevine. We met at a quiet little cafe downtown. She hugged me tightly when she arrived, which immediately triggered something in me I wasn't ready to feel. That ache, that quiet hope that maybe someone still saw me, still chose me. "Jake," she said, sliding into the booth. "I'm so sorry about all this." I didn't say anything. She sighed. "Look, I think they know they messed up, but they don't know how to fix it. Your mom hasn't been sleeping. Your dad's pretending like nothing's wrong, but it's eating him alive. They're just old and proud. And stubborn. I nodded slowly, stirring my coffee. She leaned in. Can I ask you something? Were you ever planning to tell them what you've been paying for? I looked up. I didn't do it for credit. I did it because they needed it. And because they're my parents. She paused, then asked gently, so what changed? That question hit harder than I expected. I thought about it for a while. Then I said, they looked me in the face, lied to me, and then celebrated without me. They chose to exclude me from a moment meant for family. That changed everything. She nodded slowly. They made a mistake. A big one. But they're still your. I shook my head. No. They're people who I loved. And trusted. And who proved they don't feel the same way. There wasn't much left to say after that. She gave me a sad smile, paid for my coffee when I wasn't looking, and left with a long hug and an even longer sigh. That night, I got a new kind of message. Not from my parents. From my boss. Jake, got a call from someone claiming to be your mom. She said it was urgent. Asked if we could send your pay stubs directly to her because you'd been having trouble keeping track of things. I obviously said no, but everything okay? I stared at the screen. Pay stubs? That was low. Even for them. I didn't reply right away. I didn't even get mad. I just felt a sort of cold finality slide into place. Like the last puzzle piece had clicked in. They weren't panicking because I was distant. They were panicking because their safety net was gone. And now they were scrambling, trying to get back control however they could. I blocked both of them from calling my work. I also logged into the remaining shared accounts and closed them all. No notes, no explanations. I locked down my credit, froze the joint accounts we'd barely used, and made sure no one could open anything in my name again. By the time Christmas Eve rolled around, the house I grew up in was a frozen, dark shell. At least, that's what I heard from Sarah. She called, again, but this time I picked up. Her voice was small. Jake, they're scared. I didn't say anything. They used up the emergency fund. The water heater's still broken. The space heaters shorted the breaker last night. And they won't ask for help because they think you hate them. I don't hate them, I said softly. But I'm done saving people who wouldn't even invite me to dinner. She sniffled. They're just old. They're set in their ways. You know mom spirals with money and dad shuts down when he's ashamed. It was stupid, but it wasn't personal. I felt my jaw tighten. It wasn't personal? Sarah, they lied. And not just a little white lie. They looked me in the eye and said Thanksgiving was canceled. Then they made family-only banners and fed turkey to people I haven't seen in years. You don't do that on accident. She didn't argue. Instead, she said, they're asking if you'll come over for Christmas. I laughed. Not even to talk, she added. Just be there. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then said, no. Silence. Jake. No, Sarah. Let them sit in the silence they created. I begged for their attention for years. I gave them my money, my time, my loyalty. I let myself believe I was part of something real. I believed I mattered. They proved otherwise. So now they can prove how much they miss me. Without my wallet. She didn't respond. Just breathed into the phone. I ended the call quietly and set the phone down. Christmas Day came. No calls. No texts. Just quiet. That morning, I poured myself a coffee, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and walked onto my balcony. The air was cold, sharp, but clear. There was no guilt. No dread. Just stillness. Around 11 a.m., I got a notification from my bank. A failed attempt to access a now-defunct joint account. From a location tagged as my parents' town. I smiled. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one suffering for them. I'd set boundaries. I'd followed through. And now, they had to figure out what life looked like without me cleaning up the mess. But that wasn't the end. New Year's Eve arrived like a slow-moving storm. You knew it was coming, but you didn't feel it until it hit. It was around 3 p.m. when my phone finally rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Same number. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. Jake? The voice said immediately. It was Dad. For a second, I couldn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, and it sounded smaller. More fragile. Like something in him had cracked, and he hadn't quite taped it back together. He cleared his throat. I used Brian's phone. Figured you blocked ours. I didn't answer. Just waited. I'm not calling to argue, he said. Or to beg. Just listen, okay? I remained silent. He sighed. I know we messed up. I don't even have the right words for it. But your mother and I, we've been sitting in that cold house for a month now. No heat. No internet. Lights on, barely. The fridge broke. We pawned a few things just to buy space heaters. All because we couldn't swallow our pride long enough to say what we should have said the day after Thanksgiving. Still, I stayed quiet. He continued, voice faltering. We didn't cancel Thanksgiving. We lied. Flat out. It was supposed to be just a small dinner. But then your mother thought maybe it would be nice to invite the cousins. Then your aunt offered to bring a turkey. Then the banner went up. And by then, it just felt easier not to bring it up with you. Because we didn't think you'd come. You didn't think I'd come? I said, finally breaking the silence. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't stop. After everything I've done, every bill I paid, every time I canceled plans to help you two, and you thought I'd skip dinner because, what? I didn't like cranberry sauce. No, he said quietly. We thought you'd come and realize how long it's been since you really fit in with everyone else. And your mother was scared you'd feel left out. I blinked. So you decided to leave me out ahead of time? He was quiet again. I let out a bitter breath. That's not protection. That's rejection with decorations and turkey. I know, he whispered. We failed you. We really did. A pause. Your mom's been crying every night. Keeps asking how it got this bad. Keeps saying she misses her son. The one who always helped. The one who never needed to be asked. I stood up from my kitchen stool and paced toward the window. Snow was falling now, in light flakes, soft and delicate. The world outside looked peaceful, like nothing inside this conversation could touch it. I'm not the family handyman, I said, calmer now. I'm not your emergency fund or your emotional backup generator. I'm your son, and I was the only one not invited. You're right, he said. And if you never want to speak to us again, I'll understand. But I had to say it out loud. That we're sorry. That we were wrong. That we don't deserve another chance. But we're asking anyway. I sat down on the couch and stared at the ceiling. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then he added, barely above a whisper, we sold the car. I frowned. What? We sold the car you co-signed for. To pay the mortgage. We're behind 2 months. And unless a miracle happens, the bank's going to start the foreclosure process. There it was. The full unraveling. All the safety nets I had quietly strung beneath them over the years. Cut. All the shortcuts and patches and hush money fixes. Gone. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, even though I already knew. Because we knew what the answer would be. I closed my eyes. Let the silence stretch. Then, gently, I asked, do you still have the house paperwork? Yes, he said quickly. Everything. All of it. Then take it to a real estate agent and sell it. Downsize. Move somewhere with lower costs. Get rid of the things you can't afford. Start over. You're not going to help. His voice wasn't angry. It was stunned. Like he hadn't considered the idea that this time, I might really let go. I did help, I said softly. For years. But this time, you're going to fix it yourselves. He didn't argue. Instead, he just said, I understand. And then he hung up. 3 days later, I got a text from Sarah. It was a photo. Mom and Dad in front of a small duplex, snow dusting the ground behind them. The caption just said, starting over. No pleading. No drama. Just the quiet admission that they were doing what I said. The silence that followed was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Months passed. Spring came. I hadn't spoken to them since that call on New Year's Eve. I kept track through Sarah, who sent occasional updates. They'd sold the house. Paid off their debt. Moved into a smaller place on the edge of town. Dad picked up part-time work as a warehouse clerk. Mom started volunteering at a local church. They didn't ask me for money. They didn't try to rope me back in. They just started over. On their own. And that's when I realized something important. Sometimes, love isn't about swooping in to save people. Sometimes, real love is letting people fall, not to punish them, but to finally make them stand. By summer, I decided to visit. I didn't announce it. I didn't bring gifts. I just drove to their new address, parked across the street, and stood there for a long moment, watching Dad sweep the porch while Mom tended to some hanging plants. They looked older, but they also looked lighter. I stepped forward. Mom saw me first. She froze. Her eyes welled up instantly. Jake. I nodded. Dad stood up straight. You came. I shrugged. Thought I'd see the new place. They didn't rush toward me. They didn't beg or smother. They just opened the door. And I stepped in. Not to fix things. Not to take over. Just to start again. This time as equals. This time as family, the kind you choose and who choose you back. I always figured turning 50 would be a quiet thing. Maybe dinner with the family, a few old photos passed around the table, some laughter, maybe even a few eye rolls at dad jokes. I'm not a guy who needs grand gestures. My name's Kevin. I'm 50 years old, and for the last 20 years I've done everything I can to keep this family afloat. I put in the overtime. I took the calls at midnight. I fixed the roof. I bailed out my brother when he tanked his second startup. Paid off my daughter's student loans when her art degree didn't exactly land her a six-figure job. Even helped my wife's parents remodel their kitchen. I didn't mind. I really didn't. You do it because that's what you do when you're the dependable one, when you're the rock. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. So when my wife, Lisa, told me not to make plans for my birthday weekend, I was a little touched. "We've got it covered," she said, kissing my cheek like everything was normal. "Just show up and wear something that's not a work shirt." I smiled, surprised, even a bit excited. I hadn't had a real celebration in years. Most birthdays were a quiet dinner at home, me cooking steaks and everyone too tired or distracted to even finish dessert. But this time, it seemed like they were finally doing something for me. Saturday came. I pulled up to my brother Tom's house and noticed all the cars in the driveway, more than usual. Balloons on the porch, a rented tent in the backyard, the whole 9 yards. I stepped inside, and everyone yelled, "Surprise." I blinked, overwhelmed for a second. Maybe I had misjudged them. Maybe they did care. Maybe all the sacrifices, the bills, the nights fixing broken heaters and covering missed payments, maybe they noticed. But then I saw the cake. It was bright blue, cheap grocery store frosting, and in red piped letters it said, "Congrats on peaking in 1998. I froze. Laughed a little, unsure if it was meant to be a joke or if it was supposed to sting. Then my brother raised a glass and bellowed, to the family disappointment. Everyone erupted in laughter. My daughter Megan actually doubled over. My son didn't even look up from his phone, just smirked. I stood there, smiling like a trained seal. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding, but my face was frozen. I nodded, pretended it was funny. Played along. Because that's what I've always done. I cracked a few jokes, let them slap my back like I was in on it. Then Lisa handed me a paper crown, a dollar store thing that said birthday legend. But someone had crossed it out and written burden in Sharpie. I wore it. I grilled the steaks. Yes, me, on my birthday. I poured drinks. Took the group photos. Smiled while my wife clung to her wine glass and laughed a little too loudly with Tom's new girlfriend. I caught my daughter whispering something to her cousin. They both looked at me and snickered. Megan used to cling to my leg when she was a toddler, begged me not to leave for work. Now she barely made eye contact unless she needed help paying her car insurance. As the sun dipped and the fairy lights came on, I sat by the fire pit alone. They were inside, dancing or laughing or both. I heard the music, some pop song that made my head throb. I stared at the flames and tried to convince myself it wasn't that bad. Just jokes. Family humor, right? But something cracked in me that night. It wasn't one moment. It was every little one. Every harmless jab, every whisper, every fake smile. I remember the time my brother needed 10 grand for 2 weeks, tops, and never brought it up again. I remembered when Lisa crashed the car and made me lie to the insurance company because she didn't want the points. I remembered Megan telling her friend on speakerphone, "My dad's just boring. Like, I love him, but he's there." And somehow, I'd swallowed all of that, told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't always loud. But maybe the silence wasn't love. Maybe it was just convenience. I cleaned up after the party, bagged the trash, wiped the grill down. I found a card on the table and signed that said "Better luck next year," taped to a gas station lottery ticket. I chuckled. It wasn't even scratched. When we got home, Lisa immediately went upstairs to check her messages. I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I pulled out my laptop and opened the joint savings account. The one with all the emergency money. The one I had poured bonuses and overtime into while they bought concert tickets, dog spas, and matching family vacations I wasn't invited to because you wouldn't enjoy it anyway, Dad. I stared at the balance, $143,712. I knew every dollar of it. I knew what I gave up to build it. And I transferred all of it. Not to another account. Not to anything traceable. I moved it into a private holding I'd set up years ago, just in case, fund I never touched. I left just enough in the joint account to keep the utilities auto-paying for a couple weeks. Then I shut down my phone. Booked a hotel an hour away. Left a note on the kitchen counter. Going out for a while. Don't wait up. I wasn't even out of the neighborhood when the first withdrawal notification lit up my backup number. Then another. They were trying to use the account, Megan's Spotify subscription, Lisa's Instacart, Tom's phone plan, all tied to the family fund. One after the other, they failed. Declined. 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 But I kept driving. By morning, I had 12 missed calls and 4 voicemails, all from Lisa. The first one started sweet, in that tone she always used when she wanted something. Hey, babe, I think something weird's going on with the account. Can you check it? It says my card got declined at the grocery store. Her voice tightened at the end like she was trying not to sound annoyed. The second voicemail came 3 hours later. Kevin, this isn't funny. I tried paying the electric bill and it bounced. What is going on? Call me. The third had no sweetness left in it. You're being insane, Kevin. I don't know what midlife crisis you're having, but you better come home and fix this before we all get shut off. I didn't even listen to the fourth one. I was already sipping coffee in the small hotel lounge, watching the lobby TV play some local morning news. It was quiet. Peaceful. No one yelling. No one asking for anything. No passive-aggressive jabs. No one assuming I'd pick up the check, drive the car, fix the sink, book the appointments, pay the bills, or smile through it all like it didn't eat me alive. By the third day, I knew they were spiraling. Megan posted one of those cryptic Instagram stories, a black screen with white text that said, "People always show their true colors eventually. Even your own dad." Her cousin commented a crying emoji. Another comment said, "Y'all okay?" She didn't respond. Tom called me 15 times that afternoon. No voicemail. Just calls. I didn't pick up. He finally texted, "Look, man, I know we mess around a lot, but this is serious. I need to talk to you." Then a second message, "Please." The same guy who once told me, "You're lucky you have money. I'd be a millionaire too if I didn't have a soul-sucking job like yours." On the fourth day, I got a message from my sister-in-law, "You're scaring your daughter. Just come home and talk it out." Talk it out. Like it was some little misunderstanding. Like they didn't humiliate me in front of 20 people on the one day that was supposed to matter to me. Like I hadn't been their punching bag, their walking ATM, their live-in handyman, marriage counselor, and emotional garbage disposal for 20 years. They didn't want to talk. They wanted me to fix it. By the end of the week, the family group chat, which I was conveniently accidentally removed from months ago, exploded. Megan added me back just to send a message that said, "I don't know where you went, but this is beyond messed up. You ruined our lives because of a joke? Grow up." That one hit different. Because Megan, she used to sit in my lap every Saturday morning, watching cartoons and stealing my cereal. She used to slip notes under my office door when I worked late that said, "I love you, Daddy." She used to hold my hand and say I was the only one who understood her. But somewhere between the braces and the phone bills and the concert tickets, she stopped seeing me as her dad. I became the utility, the funding, the plan B. And now that the faucet wasn't running, they were panicking. Lisa finally cracked by day 10. She showed up at my old office. I'd already taken a leave of absence and left a message with the receptionist. "Please, we need to talk. Kevin, this isn't like you." But it was. It just wasn't like the version of me she liked, the one that bent over backwards and swallowed his dignity for the sake of keeping peace in a house that only loved him when he was useful. On day 12, I checked Facebook just to see if the storm had quieted. That's when I saw it. Megan had posted a photo, a blurry shot of us from 5 years ago at her graduation, my arm around her while she held her diploma. The caption read, "If anyone knows where my dad is, please tell him we're sorry. We just want him home." There were over 300 comments, half from people saying things like, "Dads don't just disappear without a reason." Others from her friends saying, "I hope he's okay," and praying for you. And a few, buried in the replies, saying exactly what I knew would come eventually. Maybe he just got tired of being treated like crap. If he was always paying for everything, why are you surprised he left? Sounds like he finally chose peace. That post was the first real sign of remorse. Not a lot, not enough to trust yet, but it was the first crack in their perfect little bubble of denial. But I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. Not until they understood what it meant to lose me. Not until they felt the full weight of what I'd carried for years. Because the thing is, when you're the guy everyone leans on, no one ever thinks you'll walk away. They think you're a statue, immovable, dependable, and always in the background. They think you don't have a breaking point. But statues crack too. And when they do, the whole temple comes down with them. Day 13 started quiet. I sat on a bench by a lake just outside the city. It was early. Sunlight barely touched the water, and the only sounds were birds and the soft hum of the breeze. I watched an older man casting a fishing line, alone, relaxed. I wondered if he had a family waiting for him or if he, like me, had finally realized solitude didn't have to mean loneliness. That morning, I checked the savings account again. Still untouched? Still mine. The phone I'd been using, a burner, registered under an old business LLC I'd kept alive for tax reasons, pinged with a notification. An email this time from Tom. Kev, I don't know what to say anymore. I know we crossed a line. I know I did. That toast wasn't just a joke, and you're not just the family disappointment. You're the reason we've all had it as good as we have. I see that now. Please come home. Let's fix this. I read it twice. He'd never said anything like that before. Not even after all the times I bailed him out. Not after the time I caught him cheating on his wife and told no one. Not even when I covered the 10 grand he owed in back taxes that he conveniently forgot to mention to the family. But now? Now he saw it? It was tempting to respond, to believe he meant it. But then I remembered the way he'd thrown his head back and laughed during that toast. The way my wife had leaned into his shoulder like they were sharing an inside joke. The way not a single person stopped him or said, "Hey, maybe don't humiliate Kevin on his birthday." They only regretted it because they lost access to the account. That night, I drove back toward the neighborhood, but not home. I parked a street away from my house, just far enough to stay out of view. The porch light was off. The driveway had an unfamiliar car in it, Megan's friend maybe, probably trying to cheer her up. The blinds were open slightly. I could make out Lisa pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, occasionally stopping to lean on the counter like the weight of the day was crushing her. She looked tired, really tired. I didn't feel guilty, just sad. Not for her. For me. For all the birthdays I skipped for work. For all the late nights fixing everyone's mess. For all the things I missed because I believed being there for them mattered. I drove away again. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling of my hotel room, thinking about everything. About the 25 years Lisa and I had been married. About how, for the last 5, we barely even looked at each other over dinner. About how she'd once called me her safe place, but now she only seemed to call me when something was broken. I thought about Megan's post, about her caption, about whether it was real or just pressure, whether it was love or loss of convenience. On day 15, I got a call from an unknown number. I picked up, not thinking. Dad? I froze. Megan. Dad, please don't hang up. Please. I stayed quiet. Her voice cracked. I didn't know we hurt you that much. I don't know what I thought. That you were just quiet. That you didn't care if we joked like that. But I saw the pictures again. From your party. I looked at your face and you weren't smiling. Not really. I let her talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I know it's not enough. But I need to say it. I don't care about the money or the house or school. None of it matters if you're gone. Please, Dad. Please just come back. There was a long silence between us. And then she said the one thing I didn't expect. I don't think I ever told you this, but every time something bad happened growing up, I always waited for your voice. You never yelled. You just fixed things. You were the only one who made it all feel okay. My throat tightened. I hadn't cried since my dad passed away 15 years ago. But in that moment, I almost did. Almost. But instead, I asked quietly, why didn't you speak up at the party? She didn't answer right away. I was scared, she said finally. Not of them. Just scared that if I said something, you'd realize how little I did for you. And maybe you'd stop loving me. I closed my eyes. This wasn't the ending I expected. But maybe it wasn't the ending yet. I told her I needed time. That I wasn't ready to come back. That I wasn't even sure if I would. She said she understood. That she'd wait. That if I never did, she'd still be sorry. I hung up the call and sat in silence again. And then, slowly, I opened my laptop and logged into the other accounts. Not the savings. Not the credit lines. The backup files. The ones they didn't know about. Photos. Messages. Recordings. Evidence. Because the thing is, while they were laughing at the man they thought had peaked in 1998, I had been quietly preparing for the day I'd no longer be their safety net. And what I found in those files. Let's just say my wife and my brother had more in common than just bad taste and party humor. I didn't open the folder right away. After Megan's call, something in me softened, but only slightly. A part of me, The part that still remembered bedtime stories and school pickups and scraped knees, wanted to believe that love was still buried somewhere beneath the mess. But another part, the quieter and colder one, had grown too used to the silence. Too used to watching what I built get laughed at and torn apart by the very people I'd built it for. The folder was labeled simply, Contingency. It started as a joke years ago, my own private space in the cloud, created after I covered up a company crisis for Tom, and he called me paranoid for asking him to sign a simple NDA. That day, I realized something. Being the dependable one meant I never had leverage. If I ever needed to protect myself, I'd need proof. So I saved things. Receipts, screenshots, backups of emails, photos, recordings of arguments I didn't start but was always blamed for. I didn't think I'd ever use them. But now, I opened the folder. The first thing that caught my eye was a bank statement from 3 years ago. A $6,000 charge to a luxury hotel in the Bahamas. I remembered that month. Lisa had told me her mother had a medical emergency and she was flying to Florida to help. I stayed home with Megan, working double shifts, paying bills. Turns out, Lisa wasn't in Florida. She was in the Bahamas. And she wasn't alone. There were photos, she'd saved them on our shared cloud without realizing the device sync still pulled her iPhone uploads into my backup folder. Her and Tom, poolside. Matching drinks. One selfie of them under a towel, her hand on his chest. And the worst part? The timestamp matched the exact weekend she texted me. I miss you. It's so hard here. I felt numb. I'd suspected something once, years ago. Late-night texts. Inside jokes between them I didn't understand. But I pushed the thought down, told myself I was overthinking it. Because the alternative meant everything I sacrificed was a lie. There was more. A folder marked Mortgage Refi Docs 2022. Inside was a digital application Lisa submitted, using forged e-signatures under my name for a second mortgage on our house. I hadn't known we were short on money. I hadn't known the house I paid for, maintained, and built a life inside of was used as collateral for Tom's latest business venture. And it failed. That's why the savings were drained so quickly. That's why the pressure on me to just float things for a little while had suddenly ramped up last year. That's why Lisa started pushing me to dip into the retirement fund. It was all to patch over a betrayal I was never supposed to know about. But now I did. The rage didn't come all at once. It crept up, like a slow fog settling over a field. I sat with it. Let it fill every crack of me that had once been devoted to hope, to fixing, to forgiving. And once it settled in fully, I made a plan. First, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer I trusted. Not a big-name firm. Just a sharp, quiet man named Elliot who once helped me untangle a client's ugly divorce. I gave him everything, the forged documents, the financial records, the photographic evidence. I told him the truth. I wanted out, but I wanted to do it smart. No explosions. No drama. Just finality. He called me the next day and said, "We can win this clean, but you'll need to stay cold. No mercy." I said, "That's the easy part." We filed the paperwork quietly. Divorce proceedings with the evidence attached. Fraud. Infidelity. Financial abuse. I had the stronger case by miles. And the house? Still in my name. Turns out Lisa hadn't double-checked the filing when she tried to mortgage it again. The title was still locked under my trust. Another insurance policy I'd set up years ago just in case. The house was mine. The next move? I changed all passwords. Bank accounts. Credit. Froze Lisa's cards. They were all under my name anyway. Closed the joint accounts officially. Transferred the utilities. Stopped all automatic payments I was making on behalf of Megan, Tom, and even Lisa's parents. By the time they noticed, it was too late. The night before I returned home, I left one more digital note behind. I scheduled an email through a delayed sender service. Subject line: "Read this before you call." Inside was a link to a folder. It contained everything. Photos, statements, voice memos, screenshots of Lisa calling Meet the Human Wallet in a group chat with Tom and her sister. A document titled Exit Breakdown that detailed every payment I made over the past 5 years: mortgage, car loans, tuition, vacations I never went on. Every single cent. There was a second document too. A letter. "Lisa, you once told me I was your safe place. I believed you. I built my life around protecting yours. And you used that belief to strip me of everything but obligation. I don't hate you. I don't even want revenge. But I will no longer pay the price for being useful instead of loved. This house is mine. You'll have 30 days to vacate. I've spoken to my lawyer. You'll receive the full terms soon. As for Tom, tell him I hope whatever startup he starts next fails faster, so fewer people have to clean up after him. And Megan, I'm sorry you had to grow up in a house that taught you love is conditional on usefulness. Maybe this will help you see differently. Goodbye, Dad. The next morning, I returned home. Not to stay, just to be present when the process server handed Lisa the envelope. She was barefoot on the porch in a robe, hair a mess. She looked shocked, small as she opened the packet and read. Megan came outside minutes later, eyes red, holding her phone. You really did it, she said, barely above a whisper. I nodded. I warned you. With silence. She stepped closer. Dad, can we talk? Please. I'm done talking, I said. But you'll be okay. You always land on your feet. That's what Lisa always said about you. She flinched when I used her mother's first name. I turned, walked to my truck, and drove away without looking back. It's been 6 months. I live 2 states away now, in a small town where no one knows my name. I work part-time at a hardware store just to keep busy, drink coffee every morning by a window that overlooks the woods, and sleep deeper than I have in 20 years. Megan emails sometimes. She started therapy, she says. She wants to unlearn things. I haven't replied yet. I'm not ready. Tom filed for bankruptcy. Again, Lisa moved in with her sister. I heard through Elliot that she tried to fight the divorce settlement. She lost. The family group chat has been silent for months. As for me, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free. And the funny part? They thought the cake was the insult. But the real insult was thinking I'd never leave. My name's Eric, I'm 28, and this story starts on a Christmas morning that still echoes in my head like a song you don't want to hear, but can't stop playing. I've never been one to expect much during the holidays. Not because I didn't care, but because I learned early that expectations in my family were often just invitations to disappointment. We weren't poor, not rich either, but my parents always had enough for the people they liked. And for the past few years, that person hasn't been me. This year was no different. The living room smelled like cinnamon candles and the artificial pine tree we reused every year. My mom loved appearances. She made sure the garland was fluffed, the lights were warm-toned, and the cocoa mugs all matched. The gift pile under the tree looked impressive, neatly wrapped boxes with gold ribbon and tags written in her slanted cursive. Everyone was there, my sister Danielle and her husband Jason, my dad's sister Aunt Carla, even my little cousin Noah in his itchy Christmas sweater. I was sitting on the arm of the couch, watching everyone unwrap their gifts, smiling like I belonged. And then the pattern emerged. Each person opened a gift, smiled, and read the handwritten note out loud. They were long, sentimental, thoughtful. To my darling Danielle, thank you for always being my rock, my mom wrote on hers. Jason got one that thanked him for being the man we always dreamed of for our daughter. My dad's note from her mentioned their unbreakable team, and even Aunt Carla had one thanking her for being a second mother when things were tough. And then it was my turn. I looked for a box, a bag, even an envelope. Nothing. The laughter quieted a little when people realized I hadn't opened anything. Danielle looked at me awkwardly, then back at her watch. I finally asked, gently but clearly, Hey, is there something I'm supposed to be opening? Mom didn't look up from her mug. She stirred it like the cocoa had offended her. No, she said, because you've given us nothing this year. Not even respect. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp, like a needle breaking skin. My dad didn't say a word. Danielle bit her lip like she wanted to say something, but was afraid to speak. My cousin Noah looked between all of us like he didn't quite get it, but knew something was very, very wrong. I just nodded. No protest, no rebuttal. I felt this weird stillness come over me. Not numbness exactly, but something quieter than anger, deeper than hurt. I stood up and walked upstairs. I didn't slam the door, didn't stomp. Just moved. There was a box under my bed. A heavy one, taped and sealed for years. I had thought about getting rid of it more times than I could count. But something always stopped me. Some stubborn little part of me that refused to pretend none of it mattered. I came back down holding the box. My dad blinked when he saw it. My mom's fingers froze mid-stir. Danielle's eyes went wide like she knew exactly what it was. Aunt Carla? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I caught the way her jaw tightened. I didn't say anything. I just set the box down on the coffee table and took a step back. Danielle was the first to speak. Eric, is that what I think it is? I didn't answer. My dad reached forward, slowly, like the box might burn him. He peeled the tape back like it was lined with glass. Inside were stacks of envelopes, a few old camcorder tapes, and one manila folder with a bent corner. His face changed. Completely. He went pale. And I mean ghost pale, the kind of pale that makes people reach for aspirin. My mom leaned over, saw what was inside, and her whole expression collapsed. She blinked fast, like she was trying to reset the moment. You didn't really keep that, she whispered. Danielle reached for one of the envelopes. Her fingers trembled. Is this from that year? I finally spoke. It's from all the years. Every single one. Aunt Carla's voice was low, like someone trying not to be overheard. You said you destroyed those. You promised you'd never use them. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous how quickly the roles flipped. 30 minutes ago, I was the ungrateful son, the failure, the disrespectful one. Now they were staring at a box they all wished had disappeared. And I was just standing there, silent. Danielle pulled out one of the tapes. She read the label. Her voice cracked. Christmas 2005. Mom yelling. Dad threatening. Don't. My mom snapped a little too loud. This is not the time. It's exactly the time, I said. You made this morning about respect. Let's talk about what that actually means. My dad closed the box, fast. This doesn't need to go any further. I took a breath, steady. No. It needs to go exactly as far as it has to. The room was dead silent now. Not even Noah fidgeted. Aunt Carla stared at me. You're not really going to use that, are you? I looked her straight in the eye. And that's when Danielle stood up. Danielle stood slowly, holding the tape in her hand like it weighed 10 pounds. Her voice was soft, but it sliced through the room like a razor. I remember this Christmas. I was 10. I couldn't sleep, so I came downstairs. I heard yelling. Mom, you were screaming. Dad, you threw a chair. And then the next morning, you smiled for the camera like nothing happened. You handed us gifts like we were the Brady Bunch. She looked down at the tape. I thought I dreamed it. I told myself for years it couldn't have been real. But you filmed it. You filmed it, Eric. I nodded once. I didn't mean to, at first. I had that old camcorder Grandpa gave me, remember? I used to record everything. That night, I left it running by accident. Later, I watched it back. And I just kept it. My mom's voice was shrill now, defensive. You were a child. You didn't understand what was going on. We were under pressure. Financial stress, emotional. You called me a mistake, I said flatly. You told Dad you wished you'd never had a second kid, that it ruined your body and your life. Then you both joked about sending me to live with Aunt Carla. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Danielle sat back down, holding the tape like it might break. Her husband Jason leaned forward, clearly trying to make sense of the mess he'd just been pulled into. Wait, he said slowly. You're telling me you recorded proof of all this abuse, and your family just ignored it? They didn't ignore it, I said. They pretended it didn't happen. Which, honestly, is worse. My dad finally spoke. His voice was measured, rehearsed. Eric, we've made mistakes, but we've moved past them. This is not the way to handle. I cut him off. You moved past them. I carried them. His jaw clenched. You're holding on to ancient history. Digging up the past for what? Pity? Revenge? I stepped closer to the table. No, just the truth. My mom stood too, her face flushed red now. You think this makes you righteous? Keeping old tapes like some deranged archivist? You're not a martyr, Eric. You're just bitter. You think bringing up the past is going to fix anything? All you're doing is hurting your family. I looked around the room. You're right. I am hurting my family. But not because of what I did today. Because of what you did, and how you forced me to carry it in silence for 2 decades. No one moved. Aunt Carla looked like she wanted to shrink into the couch. My mom turned to Danielle, almost desperately. Tell him to stop this. Tell him this is wrong. Danielle shook her head slowly. I can't. Because he's right. We all just let it happen. We let the damage sit there like mold in the walls. We painted over it every Christmas and hoped no one noticed the smell. Jason put a hand on her shoulder. What's in the folder? He asked, nodding toward the manila envelope. I picked it up, opened it, and slid the contents onto the coffee table. Photocopies of journal pages, therapy notes, even one hospital intake form from when I was 16. My mom gasped, recognizing the letterhead. I thought you said you were in a car accident, she whispered. I didn't answer. Danielle stared at the pages. You went to the ER that night. Concussion. Bruised ribs. Said I fell down the stairs. I didn't. Dad shoved me into the doorframe. No, my dad said sharply. That's not true. You tripped. You were running down the hall. I was hiding, I said. And suddenly, the energy shifted. No more performances. No more cocoa and candles and wrapping paper illusions. The walls weren't just cracking, they were crumbling. Aunt Carla put a hand over her mouth. You kept all of this? For years, I said. Because I knew this day would come. The day you try to erase me for not fitting your perfect holiday photo. My mom was trembling now. What do you want from us? An apology? Is that it? I didn't answer. Because honestly, I didn't know what I wanted. For so long, I just wanted them to see me. Then I wanted them to hurt like I did. Then I wanted to disappear entirely. And now? I wasn't sure anymore. But I knew this. The moment I brought that box downstairs, I wasn't the quiet, overlooked one anymore. I was the mirror they couldn't avoid. The one that showed every crack they tried to hide. Danielle reached for another tape, turning it over slowly in her hand. You were alone in this house for so long, she said quietly. And none of us even asked what that did to you. The fire in the fireplace crackled. My dad sat down again, his face unreadable. Then Aunt Carla looked up at me. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, almost afraid. What are you planning to do with all of this? I met her gaze and said nothing. Because that's when my phone buzzed on the table. Everyone looked at it. A new message. From a number none of them recognized. I read it, smiled, and slid the phone across the table to my dad. He picked it up, read it, and his hand started to shake. Danielle leaned over his shoulder and read it too. Then she looked at me, stunned. Eric, she whispered. What did you do? And I just stood there, silent, waiting. My dad's fingers tightened around the phone like he wanted to crush it in his palm. His eyes darted from the screen to me, then back again. He opened his mouth once, closed it, tried again. You sent this to them? His voice cracked on the last word. He sounded smaller than I'd ever heard him. Not angry, not furious, scared. I didn't flinch. I did. Danielle grabbed the phone before he could lock the screen. Her eyes scanned it quickly, and then her whole face shifted, her usual calm cracking into disbelief. You contacted a lawyer? Aunt Carla straightened in her seat. What lawyer? Danielle read aloud, voice trembling. Confirming receipt of all materials for case review. Emotional neglect, physical abuse, financial exploitation, as discussed, will begin processing before the holiday break. Please save copies of all original evidence. Signed, Evelyn Pratt, Family Advocacy and Civil Litigation. The room went still. No coughs. No whispers. Just stunned, suffocating silence. My mom stepped forward, but she wasn't walking. She was lunging. You can't do this. You wouldn't. Eric, we're your parents. We raised you. I looked at her. Really looked at her. No. You tolerated me. You raised Danielle. You survived me. There's a difference. She actually recoiled, like the words hit her physically. My dad finally found his voice again, quieter, hoarser. This'll destroy us. Do you understand that? You'll ruin the family. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I just stopped letting you pretend you didn't. Jason, still holding the tape in his lap, looked between all of us. Wait, he said slowly, trying to process. This is a legal case? I nodded. It's a review for now. Civil, but depending on what they find in the records, and if my statements line up with the documentation, I trailed off, letting the weight of that silence speak for itself. Danielle leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, still pale. You could have told me, she said quietly. I tried. I replied, just as quietly. When we were kids, you always said I was too dramatic, that I was making things up. She closed her eyes. I was 12, Eric. I didn't know better. I nodded. I know that now. Aunt Carla looked like she was trying to piece it all together in her head. What exactly did you send them? Just the tapes. I opened the folder again and fanned it out across the table. Therapy notes, journal entries, some recorded voicemails, and a letter I wrote the night I almost left for good. Danielle flinched. You mean when you ran away? I didn't get far, I said. You remember the night differently than I do. You remember me being emotional and manipulative. I remember sleeping behind a gas station because I was too scared to go back. Jason looked up at that, alarmed. You ran away and they didn't call the police? They said I was seeking attention, I said, and grounded me when I came home. That part landed harder than I expected. Danielle buried her face in her hands. Jason looked sick. My mom finally collapsed onto the couch, still shaking her head. So what happens now? You're going to parade our mistakes in front of strangers? Let lawyers pick through our lives like a crime scene? I didn't answer right away. I looked around at the room, the garland, the tree, the half-opened presents, the half-eaten cookies. It looked like any other family Christmas. But beneath it, rot. I didn't want to do this, I said, voice steady. But this morning made it clear. You still think you've done nothing wrong. You punished me for existing, for not being what you wanted, and now you're shocked I finally pushed back. But what will they do with it? My dad asked. The firm. Will they come after us? They'll do what they're legally allowed to do, I said. Maybe it's a public record. Maybe it's compensation. Maybe it's nothing. But they'll see everything. Aunt Carla looked like she might be sick. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said. I'm finally showing it for what it is. Danielle's voice broke through the air again, this time softer, like a crack in glass. What happens to me? Am I part of this? I turned to her, gently. No, not unless you want to be. I know you were young. I know you didn't mean to look away. But if you want the truth, I'm not doing this to punish anyone anymore. I'm doing it because I deserve peace. Jason cleared his throat. You still could have just walked away. Cut ties. Why now? Why like this? I looked him in the eye. Because I've tried walking away. And they always pull me back in, for holidays, obligations, appearances. And this morning proved they still see me as less. That's not distance. That's control. Jason nodded, slowly. Danielle wiped her face. And then, for the first time that morning, my dad looked defeated. His eyes dropped to the floor. He didn't say anything. My mom didn't either. That was the first time I realized they had no idea how to respond. Not because they were sorry, but because they'd lost their grip. Then the doorbell rang. It was still morning, barely past 10. Everyone looked up, confused. No one moved. Another chime. 3 seconds later, a loud knock. My mom turned to me, eyes narrowed, suspicious. Did you? I didn't respond. Because I already knew who it was. And the second the door opened, everything would change. But I stayed standing. And waited. Danielle stood first, almost instinctively. She crossed to the door while the rest of the room stayed frozen, like someone had paused time just before a car crash. The knock came again, harder this time. Danielle hesitated with her hand on the doorknob, glanced back at me for some kind of confirmation. I nodded once. She opened it. A woman in a long gray coat stepped inside, flanked by another in business casual attire, holding a slim briefcase. The woman in the coat offered a polite smile, but her presence carried authority. Eric Halvorsen? She asked, her voice calm but commanding. I stepped forward. That's me. She nodded. I'm Evelyn Pratt. This is my associate, Leah. We're here to formally collect the physical evidence you agreed to submit. She turned to the stunned living room full of my family and added, We'll be quick. My mom's face went pale. You're not serious. You brought them? On Christmas. I shrugged. It's when they were available. I didn't think you'd be busy ignoring me again this year. Danielle looked between me and the two women like she was watching a reality show she couldn't turn off. You really went through with it. You didn't just say you were going to. Evelyn and Leah moved with practiced ease. They unpacked a small scanner, gloves, a form for signatures. I handed them the tapes, the folder, and my old camcorder, its scratched lens still intact. Evelyn cataloged everything with calm efficiency. My dad stood, anger bubbling beneath his surface like a kettle seconds from whistling. You could have talked to us. Worked this out. Quietly. You didn't have to humiliate us. No, I said evenly. I had to. Because the quiet is what let it happen in the first place. Evelyn didn't even glance up as she spoke. Mr. Halvorsen, if you have any questions about this process, we can schedule a time. Do you know what you're doing to this family? My mom cut in, voice trembling. You're poisoning it. No, Evelyn replied, still without looking at her. He's disinfecting it. The words hit like a slap. My mom took a step back, mouth slightly open, and sat down hard on the edge of the couch. Leah approached me and handed over a small form to sign. Consent for digital reproduction, she explained. We'll scan and archive these for the official report. Originals remain with you unless subpoenaed. I signed without hesitation. Danielle watched it all, slowly sitting back down beside Jason. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You were alone for so long. And we just let it be like that. I finally turned to her. You were a kid. And later, you just got used to how they treated me. Like I deserved less. Like I had earned the silence. She wiped her face. I didn't know how bad it was. I swear I didn't. I know, I said. But you could have asked. Evelyn finished packing everything up. We'll follow up in the next week. There are options for redress, civil damages, potential injunctions, even restorative mediation if the client's open to it. She turned to me. But that's your choice. Thank you, I said. As they left, Evelyn turned to my parents and said one final thing. You'll be contacted soon. I suggest you cooperate. Denial only delays the inevitable. The door closed behind them with a soft click. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Just the low hum of the heater and the crackling fire. Then my mom stood again, slowly this time, like someone recovering from a fall. She looked at me. Not through me. At me. For the first time in years. You want to make us the villains? Fine. Go ahead. But one day you'll regret this. When you're older. When you're alone. When your kids do the same to you. I looked her straight in the eyes. If my kids ever do this to me, I'll know I failed them the way you failed me. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And that was it. Danielle stood next. I think we should go, she said quietly, tugging at Jason's arm. We'll talk later, okay? Yeah, I said, and for the first time, there wasn't bitterness. Just exhaustion. As they left, Aunt Carla followed behind, mumbling something about never coming back here again. My dad sat back down, stared into the fireplace, and said nothing. My mom went to the kitchen, rattling dishes just to make noise. I went to the stairs and paused. There, on the second step, was the same creak I remembered avoiding when sneaking around as a kid. It used to be my enemy, giving me away. Now, it just felt like history beneath my feet. I packed that night. Quietly. No need to announce it. No need for a dramatic exit. I left a single note on the kitchen counter. You were right. I didn't give you anything this year. But I finally gave something to myself. I drove out of town before sunrise. The firm followed up in early January. They validated the contents, found corroborating evidence in my old medical records, and initiated a formal inquiry. There were consequences. Not public scandals, not tabloid drama, but quiet, sharp consequences. A restraining order. Civil penalties. An investigation into how financial decisions were made in my name as a minor, especially regarding a closed savings account I'd never touched, but which mysteriously vanished in 2012. Danielle and I talked again. Not immediately, but a few weeks later, she called. We met for lunch. It wasn't dramatic. Just two people learning how to be siblings again. She apologized. Genuinely. Said she wanted to do better. And for once, I believed her. My parents sent a letter. 6 pages. Half apology, half justification. I didn't reply. Some doors are better closed, and not every knock deserves an answer. I moved to a smaller town, closer to the coast. Found work that gave me peace. Started therapy again. Real therapy, not the stuff they once forced me into so I could be fixed. I didn't bring the tapes. Didn't need them anymore. Because I wasn't trying to prove anything. I already had. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was just surviving Christmas. I wasn't hoping for acknowledgement or bracing for shame. I was just living, which, in the end, was the greatest gift I could have given myself. And unlike the ones they used to hand out, this one actually meant something. I was 19 the first time I realized my future didn't belong to me. It belonged to my brother. My name's Drew, and at the time, I didn't have much to my name except a half-dead HP laptop with a cracked screen, a pair of noise-canceling headphones I got secondhand, and a brain that couldn't stop thinking about code. Ever since I was 12, I'd been obsessed with how things worked behind the screen. I taught myself Python using YouTube tutorials on a borrowed school Chromebook. Built a browser game in JavaScript when I was 14. At 16, I made a simple budgeting app for my mom after she complained about losing track of her grocery expenses. She never used it, of course, but that didn't matter to me. I wasn't doing it for applause. I was doing it because I couldn't not do it. My parents never really understood any of that. My dad, Harold, was a welder who believed in real work, the kind that made your back hurt and your hands calloused. And my mom, Diane, came from a long line of people who thought computers were just a phase, like Frosted Tips or Beanie Babies. The kind of people who say things like, you need a real skill, while struggling to use the printer. Still, I figured when the college acceptances started rolling in, they'd see I wasn't just some kid tapping away at a keyboard in the dark. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd take me seriously. I was wrong. When I got into two solid-state schools for computer science, I came to them with the letters in my hands and this dumb, hopeful grin on my face. I thought they'd be proud. Instead, my mom didn't even look up from her phone. "That's nice, honey. But have you thought about community college?" she said, like I'd just told her I got a coupon in the mail. My dad just asked if the schools taught plumbing too, just in case. But the real kick in the teeth came a few weeks later when I sat down with them to talk about tuition. I knew we didn't have much money, but I'd been offered some scholarships, and I was ready to hustle. Part-time job, campus housing, the works. All I needed was their help co-signing for a small loan. That's when my mom gave me the look. You know the one. Head tilted, lips pursed, voice soft like she's breaking bad news. "Be realistic, Drew," she said. "Your brother needs that tuition more than you." I actually laughed at first. I thought she was joking. But her face didn't change. Neither did my dad's. They just stared at me like I should have known. My brother, Eric, was 23 at the time. He'd already dropped out of 2 different programs, business, then hospitality, and spent most of his days tinkering with get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out. One week it was flipping sneakers, the next it was crypto, then it was a drop-shipping empire. Every time something failed, my parents wrote it off as a learning experience. "He's figuring himself out," they'd say. "He just needs a little more support." Apparently, that support was now my future. "So what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're giving my college fund to him? Even though he's not even in school anymore?" My dad shrugged. "He's your older brother. He's going through a rough patch. You'll find another way. You're the smart one, remember?" That night, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about what they saw when they looked at me. Not a person with ambition or talent, just a backup plan. A spare. The dependable one who didn't need help because he'd figure it out. I packed my things the next morning. My mom cried. My dad offered me $100 and said, "You'll be back when the real world hits you." I didn't take the money. Instead, I withdrew $300 from the summer job I'd been working at a local cafe, stuffed my cracked laptop into a backpack, and took a bus 2 hours away to a friend's garage in a small town near the city. He let me crash there for a few weeks while I figured things out. It smelled like motor oil and cold pizza, but it was freedom. I worked part-time at a computer repair shop, fixed old motherboards, installed RAM, and taught myself front-end development at night. I was exhausted, broke, and eating more ramen than any human should, but I was building something. And nobody could take that from me. I didn't call home. They didn't call me either. Every now and then, I'd hear from my cousin that Eric had started some new venture, like an online casino that got flagged for fraud 2 months in, or a wellness brand that was just repackaged dollar store vitamins. Each time, I expected a call, some acknowledgement that they'd picked the wrong horse. But nothing ever came. They doubled down on him, and I was the family ghost now. Then one night, about 5 years later, I was sitting in the apartment I could finally afford, small, clean, quiet, with a dual monitor setup that would have made 16-year-old me cry from joy when I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and there they were. My parents, standing awkwardly in the hallway, holding a Tupperware container of homemade lasagna like it was a peace offering. And behind them, looking sheepish but not quite sorry, was Eric. That was the moment I knew something was up. They hadn't seen me in 5 years. Hadn't called, hadn't messaged, hadn't so much as reacted to my birthday posts on Facebook. And now they were here? With lasagna? I let them in. I shouldn't have, but I did. The tension was thick, like walking into a dinner party where someone had just finished yelling. My mom gave me a weird, forced smile and said, "You've done well for yourself, Drew." My dad just nodded and muttered something about the place looking nice. But Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. I offered them water. We sat down. That's when they finally said it. They needed $120,000. Not a typo. Not a joke. Eric had, apparently, hit a rough spot again. Something about an investor, some kind of failed app, maybe a loan with ridiculous interest. The details were fuzzy, and every time I asked for clarification, my mom just waved her hand like, "It's complicated." What was clear was that the business had collapsed. Hard. And not only was Eric facing lawsuits, he was also on the hook for paying back more money than any of them could imagine. "So we came to you," my dad said, his tone shifting into that voice he used when I was 12 and left the garage light on. "You're in tech now. You're doing great. We figured you could help your brother out of a jam." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at them. These people who once told me to be realistic, who gave up on me without a second thought, who never even asked if I was okay all those years. And now they wanted 6 figures? That was when Eric finally spoke. He said something so ridiculous, so shameless, that I almost forgot to breathe. And that, right there, is where everything started to shift, where the part of me that had spent 5 years holding on to restraint and forgiveness finally cracked. Eric didn't even look at me when he spoke. He kept his eyes low, picking at the frayed seam of his jeans like a kid waiting to be scolded. And then, with a sigh so rehearsed it almost sounded bored, he said, "Look, I know I've made mistakes, but I wouldn't be in this situation if I had the same support you got." I blinked. My mouth actually fell open a little. For a second, I thought maybe I misheard him. "The same support?" I repeated. He looked up finally, and I'll never forget the expression he wore. This strange blend of self-pity and entitlement, like he truly believed he'd been cheated out of something that was rightfully his. "Yeah," he said, "you gotta just go off and do your thing. No pressure. No one breathing down your neck. You had time to find yourself." I never had that. I was always expected to succeed. It messed with my head, man. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't even funny. It was just that kind of disbelief-laced laughter you can't suppress when someone says something so backwards you can't process it in silence. "You had everything handed to you," I snapped. "They paid for your first 2 colleges. They co-signed your car. They covered your rent twice when you couldn't afford it. They paid for that dumb motivational retreat in Arizona. Remember that? The one with the life coach who told you your energy wasn't aligned with your destiny? I was eating instant noodles in a garage while you were sipping coconut water in a hot tub trying to manifest success. Don't talk to me about support." My mom clucked her tongue in that disappointed mom way, like I was the one being rude now. "Drew, that's not fair. Eric's had a rough journey. You don't need to throw it in his face." "No," I said, standing up. "What's not fair is being told my future didn't matter because he needed my tuition. What's not fair is being treated like a safety net, like the fallback plan if Eric messed up again." Which, surprise, he did. Again. Eric folded his arms and muttered, "You don't have to be a jerk about it." I turned on him. "You think I owe you something? After all these years? You think I've just been chilling this whole time, living the dream? I was homeless, Eric. I slept in a garage for 4 months. I worked 12-hour shifts repairing computers for minimum wage just so I could afford a used Chromebook and an internet plan. I taught myself to code from scratch, built a portfolio from nothing, freelanced for people who paid in gift cards until I landed my first real gig. You had parents funding your failures while I had to treat mine like death sentences. And now you're here saying you didn't get support." That shut him up. For a moment, at least. My dad stood, trying to defuse things the way he always did. Gruff tone, hands on hips, trying to play peacekeeper without actually taking a side. "All right, that's enough. We didn't come here to fight. We just need help. That's all. We're family. Family." That word hit different coming from him. It felt hollow. Performed. A script he'd used one too many times without ever meaning it. "Funny," I said. "I don't remember being family when I was sleeping in a hoodie because I couldn't afford heat. I don't remember being family when you told me to be realistic and handed my future to Eric like it was spare change." My mom's voice grew tighter, more defensive. "We were trying to keep the family together. You always acted like you didn't need us." "I didn't want to need you," I said quietly. We stood in silence for a while. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Regrets, blame, broken expectations. And then my mom, clearly desperate to turn the emotional tide, placed her hand gently on my arm and said, "Drew, we're not asking for a gift. It's a loan. We know you're doing well now. You have your own business, right? You can spare it." It wasn't the money that broke me. It was the casualness. The assumption that my success existed for them. That everything I'd bled for, every sleepless night, every bitter winter I'd spent shivering in front of a space heater, was just a resource they could tap into when Eric dug himself into another hole. That's when I realized they didn't see me as a person. Not really. I was a safety net, a resource, the plan B. And the worst part? They didn't even seem ashamed of it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw them out. I just stood there, staring at them, and said, "You need to leave." My mom looked wounded, like I'd slapped her. "Drew, now," I said sharper, "before I say something I won't take back. My dad muttered something about ungrateful under his breath. Eric just looked stunned, like this was the first time in his life he'd ever been told no and didn't know how to process it. They left. No hug. No goodbye. Just the sound of my front door clicking shut, followed by the fading shuffle of footsteps in the hall. I stood there in the silence, the lasagna still on the table, untouched. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, I got a call from my Aunt Marlene, my mom's sister. She's the only relative who ever checked in on me after I left home. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but she called me in a panic. "Drew," she said, "I need to warn you. Your parents are telling everyone you cut them off for no reason, that you refused to help your brother in a time of crisis. People are calling you selfish." My stomach dropped. What? Yeah. Apparently Eric told the family you're sitting on millions and refused to loan him a penny. Your mom's crying to everyone about how she raised a cold-hearted son. And now your cousin's talking about setting up a GoFundMe for Eric. That's when the nausea kicked in. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the smear campaign. The twisting of the story to make me the villain again. It was high school all over again, where Eric crashed my bike and told my parents I'd forgot to lock it, and I got grounded for a month. Only now the stakes were higher. My name was being dragged through the mud by people who hadn't spoken to me in years. I thought that was as bad as it would get. I was wrong. Because a week later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. Mailed. Stamped. Signed. It was from a lawyer. My parents were threatening to sue me for emotional damages. I kid you not. Emotional damages. They claimed that my refusal to help had caused Eric such distress that he was now suffering significant mental anguish and reputational harm, and that they were seeking restitution for the sake of family unity. It was absurd, but it was also real. I had to hire a lawyer, pay fees, sit through consultations explaining that I owed them nothing, that there was no legal ground for their case. It never made it to court, of course. Their lawyer probably realized how flimsy it was and backed off. But the message was clear. This wasn't just desperation anymore. This was war. And that was the moment something in me shifted. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. Resolve. Because if they wanted to treat me like an enemy, they were about to learn how dangerous it was to push someone who spent 5 years clawing their way out of the dirt without a single hand offering to help. I stopped being afraid. I stopped hoping for an apology that was never coming. I started looking at everything I'd built. Not just the company, but the connections, the influence, the quiet respect I'd earned in the tech community. And I realized I had more power than they ever gave me credit for. That's when the plan began to form. And let me tell you, they had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep the night the letter came. Not because I was scared of some bogus lawsuit. I wasn't. The legal system wasn't on their side, and I knew it. But it still did something to me. The paper trembled in my hands, even though I wasn't cold. It wasn't fear, not really. It was something deeper, something hollow. A realization that I had tried so hard to become someone they'd respect, someone they'd see, and all I'd earned was a thread in writing. That night, I stared at my bedroom ceiling and thought about the kid I used to be. The one sitting cross-legged in the garage, teaching himself how to build a game where cats chased lasers. The one who once believed that if you worked hard enough, you'd earn your family's pride. Turns out, the only thing I earned was a target on my back the moment I proved I could stand without them. I hit a low I didn't expect that week. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry into my pillow or scream at the wall. It was quieter than that. I stopped answering emails, paused every client project I had, let my phone battery die, and didn't bother recharging it for 2 days. Food didn't taste like anything. The world didn't feel like anything. I wasn't depressed, not exactly. I was just worn out, spiritually threadbare, like the part of me that used to fight had gone to sleep. My lawyer, Mitch, a solid guy I met through a developer conference, called and left a message. "They've got no case. Don't worry, but call me back when you're ready." I didn't call him back for a week. The letter sat on my kitchen counter like a rotten piece of fruit. I didn't touch it, but I couldn't throw it away either. The worst part wasn't the attack, it was the silence after. I started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I had become cold. Maybe success had hardened me. Was it so wrong to help your own brother when he was drowning? That kind of thought slithered in late at night, when the house was too quiet and the city outside had gone to sleep. You'd be amazed at how convincing your worst thoughts can sound when no one's around to challenge them. But then I got a text. It was from Colin, an old friend from the garage days. We used to take turns fixing dead laptops and eating chili when we were both broke and dreaming of Silicon Valley. He'd made it too, joined a cybersecurity startup a couple of years ago, and was now lead architect. We hadn't talked in months, but out of the blue, he messaged, "Hey, I saw your latest app launch. Freaking brilliant, man. Proud of you." I stared at the text for a long time. It wasn't a big thing, just one sentence, but it snapped something back into place. Because he knew. He knew where I came from, what it took, that I wasn't some cold-hearted tech bro swimming in cash. I was the kid who rewired old routers for rent money. The guy who once built an entire backend system from scratch just to prove he could. That reminder lit a fuse. I plugged in my phone. Returned Mitch's call. "I'm good," I told him. "Thanks for holding the line. Let's shut this down clean." He sounded relieved. "They've already gone quiet," he said. "I think they realized they were outmatched." "Let them stay quiet," I said. But I wasn't done. Once the legal dust settled, I got to work. Not out of spite, not yet, but out of necessity. I needed to rebuild what they'd shaken. Not just my business, but my mindset. I started with the basics. Cleaned my apartment, sorted through overdue messages, replied to clients with honest updates. One of them, an AI startup in Austin, had been waiting on a dashboard tool I'd promised before everything blew up. I emailed them, apologized, and told them I'd understand if they moved on. They didn't. Instead, their CTO responded, "We'll wait. You're worth it." Another ember lit. For the first time in weeks, I sat down at my desk with purpose. Opened up VS Code, adjusted my monitor height, cracked my knuckles. I pushed the lawsuit out of my mind and dove into the code like it was a lifeline. 4 days later, the dashboard tool was done. And better than I expected. The CTO called me and said, "This is the best UX we've ever had. If you're open to it, we want to bring you on for something bigger. Equity level." And just like that, I was back. But it wasn't about money anymore. I had enough. I didn't need to chase 6 figures every quarter or land a new client every week. What I needed was to reclaim something. My voice, my direction, my self-worth. So I did something I'd never done before. I started writing. Not code, words. I opened a blank document and started journaling everything. Not for a blog, not for social media, just for me. I wrote about the garage days, the cheap ramen, the nights I fell asleep watching Stack Overflow tutorials, the times I almost gave up. I wrote about the way my mom used to say computers don't pay the bills, and how Eric once mocked my projects as nerd stuff. The writing wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, but it was true. And it reminded me that my story wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was fuel. It was proof that I had built something from nothing, that I was something. Then something strange happened. One of the startups I worked with, a mental health platform, asked if I'd be willing to write a guest post for their founder's blog about resilience in the tech space. I said no at first. I wasn't a writer. I was a builder. But then I thought about what Colin had said, about being proud. So I said yes. I wrote about the garage, about being told I was wasting my time, about the $300 and the cracked laptop, about teaching myself code by moonlight and sheer desperation. I didn't name my family, but I didn't protect them either. I told the truth. The post went live 3 weeks later. It exploded. Thousands of views. Comments from young developers who saw themselves in my story. Emails from people who said, "I thought I was alone." One message came from a girl in Idaho who said she was living in her car, trying to learn coding on a phone with a cracked screen. She wrote, "Your story made me believe I can make it too. Thank you." I sat with that for a long time. That was the moment I realized I didn't need my parents' approval anymore. I didn't even want it. Because I had something better. Impact. My story mattered to people who actually cared, who actually listened, who saw me. And that was the rise. It didn't come with confetti. There was no big made it moment with champagne and fireworks. It was quieter than that. It was waking up and not feeling ashamed of being ambitious. It was walking past my old repair shop and smiling instead of cringing. It was saying no to a big contract because I didn't need to prove myself anymore. It was peace. But the fall? That part wasn't over yet. Because even as I rebuilt myself, I knew something was still hanging in the air like a storm cloud on the horizon. My parents had gone quiet, sure. But silence wasn't safety. It was just the sound of something brewing. And I was finally ready to face it. Because when the storm came again, I wasn't going to run. I was going to stand in the center of it and let it try. And when it passed, there'd be nothing left of the old story. Only the truth. Only me. But the setup for that? The plan I put in motion after? That's what changed everything. It started with an email. Not a threatening one. Not one from a lawyer. Just a simple message that read, "Hey Drew, long time no talk. I heard you're doing some great things. Would love to reconnect. Maybe grab coffee." It was signed Tiffany, followed by a smiley face. Tiffany was my cousin. More specifically, Eric's favorite cousin. The one who used to tell me to lighten up every time Eric insulted me at family events. The one who once laughed when Eric changed my laptop password as a prank the night before my college entrance interview. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 6 years. I stared at the email for a long time before closing my laptop. Something was moving. The timing was too perfect. The lawsuit had fizzled out barely a month ago. The blog post had gone viral. My freelance work had doubled, and I'd just been invited to speak on a tech panel for up-and-coming developers. For the first time in my life, I had leverage, status, network, money, and a story people actually cared about. So why was Tiffany trying to grab coffee? I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down and started mapping things out, on paper, old school. I drew a timeline of everything that had happened since I left home. The betrayal, the garage, the rebuild, the lawsuit, and now this, reaching out. The same people who threw me away were starting to circle back. Why? Because the story had flipped. I wasn't the dropout tech nerd with a pipe dream anymore. I was a founder, a builder, a name. Not a celebrity, not yet, but I was visible, and in their world, visibility meant opportunity. And money. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to move through, not out of anger, not even for justice, for clarity, for every kid who'd been the backup plan in their family, for every sibling who was sacrificed at the altar of the golden child. For me, I was going to show them what they threw away, and I was going to make sure they couldn't rewrite the story this time. The first thing I did was say yes to the tech panel. It was scheduled for late October, 4 months away. That gave me time to build something big, something that would land with enough force to make waves, the kind of thing that couldn't be ignored or downplayed. So I reopened the project I'd shelved 2 years ago, a platform for freelance developers, built by freelancers. No fluff, no corporate nonsense. Just raw, honest tools, secure contract templates, payment protection, portfolio showcasing, and a community that wasn't fueled by upvotes or fake clout. I had sketched it during a rough patch in year 3, but shelved it when a client wave hit. Now, with income stable and support at my back, I knew it was time. I reached out to Colin first. "Remember DevNet?" I texted, "It's time." He replied in 5 minutes. "You serious? Count me in." Then I called Lila, a UI/UX designer I'd worked with on a fintech project last year. She was sharp, fast, and had the rare gift of designing interfaces that didn't make you want to gouge your eyes out. She didn't hesitate. "You're building it for the people who never get the spotlight," she said. "Let's do it." Within 2 weeks, we had a remote team of 5. Me, Colin, Lila, a back-end genius from Lagos named Obi, and a QA tester named Mira I found through a Reddit thread of all places. We didn't sleep much. We didn't need to. The momentum was real. But I didn't just want to build a great product. I wanted to tell a story. My story. So in parallel, I started documenting the process. I called it From the Garage, a behind-the-scenes video series showing how DevNet was built from scratch by 5 people who'd all been overlooked in some way. No drama, no forced virality, just real people solving real problems. The first episode got 10,000 views. The second? 40,000. Then someone on LinkedIn shared it with a quote. "This is what tech used to be, builders building." Comments flooded in from students, freelancers, and burned-out devs who said they finally felt seen. I still hadn't said anything about my family, but I knew they were watching. Tiffany emailed again. This time she was more direct. "Your parents saw your video. They've been asking about you. Eric said he's willing to apologize. Maybe we can all get dinner." Apologize? Eric? The same guy who tried to sue me for emotional damages? Who told half the family I was hoarding millions while he was fighting for his future? I didn't respond, but I started preparing. Because what Tiffany didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already begun gathering information. I reached out to Aunt Marlene again. She'd always been the only one who didn't treat me like a disappointment. I asked if she'd heard anything more about Eric's situation. She had. Apparently, the $120,000 mess was far bigger than I imagined. It wasn't just debt. Eric had defrauded an investor. He'd pitched a fake crypto coin, gotten funding under false pretenses, and was now being investigated. He'd used our parents' house as collateral for a private loan to cover the losses, without telling them the full truth. And now the bank was circling. That's why they wanted dinner. That's why they wanted peace. Not because they missed me, because they needed me. So I gave them what they wanted. I agreed to meet. We scheduled dinner at a mid-range Italian place near the suburb where they lived. A neutral zone, public enough to avoid a scene. I wore a simple dark button-up and jeans, clean, confident, unflashy. Let them see success without the show. I arrived on time. They were already there. My mom stood up and hugged me like we hadn't spent 5 years pretending each other didn't exist. My dad nodded like we were old poker buddies catching up after a long break. Eric gave me the kind of half smile you give someone when you owe them everything but can't admit it. I didn't hug back. I just sat. We made small talk. My mom asked if I was still doing computers. My dad asked if my car had one of those Tesla dashboards. Eric avoided eye contact until the drinks arrived. Then, finally, he said it. I messed up. I stayed quiet. I just thought I could build something fast, he continued. You made it look easy. I thought if I just pushed hard enough, something would land. You stole, I said flatly. You lied. He flinched. I know. And I'm sorry. My mom reached for my hand. We didn't know everything until recently. He kept us in the dark. We thought maybe, if you were willing to help. And there it was. The ask. I didn't respond. I just sipped my water, then reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. My mom's eyes widened. What's that? I slid it across the table. Eric opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, a screenshot of the From the Garage video thumbnail, with the caption, "We don't save those who threw us away. We build without them." And below it, in bold letters, I already helped. Just not you. They didn't get it. At first. Then Eric looked up, jaw tight. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I know I am. My mom's eyes welled up. My dad muttered something about pride. Eric stood and dropped the envelope like it burned him. This isn't over. But it was. They just didn't know it yet. Because I had one last move to make. And trust me, that was the real checkmate. They say revenge is best served cold, but I didn't want it cold. I wanted it calculated. Surgical. Not to destroy them, but to show them, without a single doubt, what they lost when they pushed me away. When they bet everything on Eric and treated me like the backup plan. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to humiliate them publicly. I just needed to press the right pressure points at the right time. And so, I began with the one thing they always underestimated, information. After that awkward dinner, I went home, logged into my private research folder, and opened what I'd been quietly building for weeks, a collection of receipts. Not literal ones, digital ones. Screenshots, emails, public records. It started with Eric's fake crypto project, NeoCoinX. A flashy, buzzword-laced site he'd thrown together with a Wix template, full of promises and hype, but absolutely no white paper or technical documentation. The kind of scam you could smell from 2 clicks away. But he had investors, some minor, one major. A mid-tier angel investor from Chicago named Alan Cross who had dropped $80,000 into Eric's pitch after being shown forged early revenue numbers. I confirmed that via a cached investor deck Eric had uploaded to a private file-sharing site, which he'd accidentally linked on his now-defunct LinkedIn page. Sloppy. Typical. I could have gone to Alan directly, sent the proof, blown it wide open, but that would have made it personal. I wanted it to feel inevitable. So instead, I used DevNet. At that point, the platform was weeks away from launch. Our closed beta had already hit 5,000 users. Developers, designers, QA testers, even project managers. We had a waiting list of people ready to drop Upwork and Fiverr like dead weight. Our soft launch was scheduled to go live the same week as the tech panel I'd been invited to speak on. And I made sure it would be Eric's unmaking. Here's how. I released a new blog post as part of our Stories from the Underground launch campaign. Each post featured a real freelance journey. People who had been burned by the system and rose from it. I wrote mine anonymously under the name Code Phoenix. It was raw, detailed, and unfiltered. I laid it all out. How I was denied my college fund because my brother needed it more. How I left home with $300 and a broken laptop. How the same people who dismissed me came crawling back when my success became convenient. And how the golden child, after years of burning every opportunity, had now committed fraud and tried to drag me down with him. I didn't name names, but I did link receipts, public documents, archived web pages, the investor deck, a cached copy of the NeoCoinX site, a screenshot of the GoFundMe Eric's friend had launched under false pretenses. The post hit 100,000 views in the first 48 hours. It got shared on Reddit, Hacker News, Tech Twitter. Even a few niche YouTube channels picked it up for commentary. And then came the email. From Alan Cross. Subject line. Is this about NeoCoinX? I didn't reply right away. I let it marinate. Then, 3 days before the tech panel, I sent him a polite response. Alan, it is. I can't speak directly for legal reasons, but I recommend reviewing the pitch deck Eric Nolan sent you and comparing it to the current status of the project. I believe you'll find some inconsistencies worth your attention. Regards. DN. He responded within an hour. Thank you. Legal is on it. I thought that was the end of it. I didn't expect what happened next. The panel event arrived. A big one. Live-streamed, 15K viewers, hosted by a major freelance platform. I was slotted last, which meant I closed the show. Perfect positioning. I gave the speech of my life. I didn't make it about revenge. I made it about value. About overlooked talent. About the people building quietly while the loud ones flame out. I spoke about the gig economy, about why platforms like DevNet were born, because too many builders were being crushed under the weight of broken systems and broken promises. And I ended with this. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being underestimated. Because while they're busy betting on someone louder, you get the space to become someone stronger. And one day, when they come knocking, not out of love, but out of need, you'll realize they never saw you at all. But by then, it won't matter. Because you'll have already built something they can never touch. Standing ovation. By the time I got off stage, my phone was blowing up. Alan had filed suit. The NeoCoinX investor group released a public statement. Eric's site had been taken down. And then, 2 days later, the real fallout began. My parents' house, the one Eric used as collateral, it was seized. Apparently, the bank had tried to contact them months ago, but Eric had been intercepting the notices. When they finally got the official letter, it hit like a grenade. They called me. Voicemail after voicemail. My mom crying. My dad yelling. Eric, pleading. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I posted one final blog entry. A goodbye. You can love people and still walk away from them. You can forgive someone and still hold them accountable. I don't hate my family, but I love myself more. And that's why I'm done. I shut down the blog the next day. Let the story rest. DevNet launched to the public a week later. We trended on Product Hunt. Colin gave me the biggest bear hug of my life during our team Zoom call. Lila cried. Obi said, told you this would shake the system. Mira baked a cake and posted a photo with Garage to Glory written in blue frosting. And me? I moved on. Moved up. Bought a condo near the city. Started mentoring young developers. Invested in a few small startups that reminded me of my younger self. I stayed low profile, but my name carried weight now. The industry knew me, not as the bitter tech guy with family baggage, but as the builder, the fighter, the guy who turned betrayal into blueprint. As for my parents, they moved in with Tiffany, apparently. Or maybe it was another cousin. I didn't follow up. Their GoFundMe quietly vanished. No one talks about Eric anymore. He changed his name on social media to E.J. Nolan and tried to start a podcast about entrepreneurship and mindset. It never made it past 3 episodes. He DM'd me once. Said, you really destroyed me, man. I didn't reply, because I didn't destroy him. He did that all by himself. All I did was show the world who he really was. And the moment they saw the truth, he crumbled, just like he always did. The difference was, this time, I wasn't there to clean it up. I wasn't the backup plan anymore. I was the blueprint. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't what you do to them. It's what you build without them. I was 29 the last time I stepped foot in my parents' house. It was a chilly Sunday morning in late October, the kind where the air smells like damp leaves and the sky just sort of hangs there, low and gray like it's tired of pretending to be cheerful. I'd driven 3 hours without music, just the hum of the tires and my thoughts playing bumper cars in my head. I hadn't seen my family in nearly a year, not since my brother's birthday dinner where I was seated at the far end of the table like a forgotten guest. But my mom had called earlier that week, voice honeyed and casual, asking if I'd come down to see them for a bit. Just for lunch, she said. Nothing dramatic. I should have known better. My name's Brian. I work in software, live alone, pretty quiet life overall. Nothing flashy. I'm not estranged from my family, not officially, but I've always felt like I was tolerated more than loved. The spare piece that didn't quite fit into the perfect picture my parents were trying to frame. My brother, Aaron, 3 years older and born with that natural charisma that made adults chuckle and ruffle his hair, always fit the mold perfectly. He went to law school, married his college sweetheart, gave our parents 2 adorable grandkids, and lives exactly 20 minutes away from them. Me? I moved out of state the second I could afford rent on my own, dated here and there, poured myself into my career. The way my family sees it, Aaron built a life. I built a hobby. Still, I wasn't going down there to start anything. I told myself that repeatedly. I'd rehearsed how I'd keep things light, smile politely, dodge the jabs I knew were coming, and just leave after a few hours. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I thought I was mature enough to rise above it all. But deep down, I think I just wanted to be proven wrong. I wanted to believe that maybe things had changed. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. White paint peeling just a bit under the windows, garden gnomes my mom insisted were whimsical, and the same faded welcome mat that had been there since I was a teenager. I stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets, before knocking. My mom answered with her usual tight-lipped smile and a quick, perfunctory hug. "You look tired," she said before I could even say hello. "Are you eating enough?" Classic. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, something Aaron's wife probably prepped earlier. She's big on meal planning. I said hello to my dad, who gave me a distracted wave from his recliner without looking up from the news. The grandkids were over too, apparently, judging by the shrieks coming from upstairs. And of course, Aaron arrived just minutes after me, perfectly timed as always, breezing in with a joke and a bottle of wine. Everyone lit up. My mom kissed his cheek. My dad finally turned off the TV. Even the dog started wagging its tail like it had just seen Elvis. I stood there like furniture. We made small talk around the kitchen island. I asked about the kids' school projects, nodded through Aaron's story about some corporate merger I didn't care about, and politely declined the wine. "Still not drinking?" Aaron asked, eyebrows raised like that was some great character flaw. "Good for you, I guess." My mom gave a thin smile and changed the subject. That's when I noticed it. The wall. It used to be filled with framed photos, vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings where we all wore matching pajamas that I hated. But something felt off. I walked toward it slowly, like my legs weren't quite convinced I needed to see what my gut already knew. Every photo was there. Every memory. Except I wasn't in them. The shot from Disneyland in '98? Just mom, dad, and Aaron holding Mickey balloons. My face gone. The picture from my high school graduation? Aaron in his suit, my parents in front of the school sign, but I was missing. The Christmas photo from 2011? Aaron in his Santa hat, his arms slung around thin air where I knew I had stood. I leaned in. Not just cropped. Photoshopped. The edges were too clean. The lighting didn't match. Whoever did it tried to be subtle, but I work in tech. I know how masking works. They'd erased me. I turned to my mom. What would happen to the pictures? She didn't even look embarrassed. She just shrugged, reaching into a cabinet for plates like we were talking about weather. "Oh, Aaron cleaned them up a bit," she said. "Made them nicer." I blinked. "Nicer? I'm not in any of them." She paused, as if just realizing that. "Well, they look better this way," she said simply, then walked out to set the table. I stood there for a long time. I don't remember sitting down for lunch. I don't remember what I ate. I remember Aaron talking loudly, my dad laughing, the grandkids screaming, and me sitting there like a ghost in a room where I used to exist. Not a single person mentioned it again. No apology. No explanation. Like I was supposed to pretend it didn't matter that I'd been erased from my own family history. I left before dessert. My mom tried to pack me leftovers and seemed mildly offended when I refused. "Don't be so dramatic," she muttered. "You always make everything about you." I didn't say goodbye. I didn't hug anyone. I got in my car and drove straight home, this time with the radio blasting just so I didn't have to hear my own thoughts echoing back at me. They've called a few times since then. Texted too. Mostly about upcoming birthdays or holiday plans. When I don't respond, I get the guilt trips. "We're all worried about you. You're being selfish. Why are you punishing us?" But they're not worried. They're just confused why their doormat stopped lying down. I haven't told anyone the full story. Not yet. not even my closest friends. I've just said that things are complicated with my family. But last night, I got a voicemail from my mom, her voice tight, like she was trying to cry without ruining her mascara. "I don't understand what we did wrong, Brian," she said. "You're always so sensitive. Are you really not coming to Thanksgiving? You're tearing this family apart." I listened to it 3 times. Then I opened my laptop. Because if they want to pretend I never existed, maybe it's time I start pretending they don't either. But not before I do something they'll never forget. I didn't respond to my mom's voicemail. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there in my inbox like a loaded gun on a table, untouched, but impossible to ignore. For a while, I thought maybe I'd forget about it. Maybe the sting of that visit would fade, and I'd just go back to pretending, like I always had. But the thing about being erased, literally erased, is that it doesn't fade. It festers. Every time I opened a photo app or scrolled past an old memory on social media, I'd think about that wall, that gallery of my own life, rewritten without me. Like I had been an inconvenience, a smudge. A few weeks passed. I focused on work, buried myself in debugging code and long nights with takeout. I didn't answer texts. I stopped checking the family group chat, which I mostly stayed in out of habit anyway. It wasn't like they ever messaged me directly. Everything was either about Aaron's kids or some plan I was never invited to until the last second, as if I was an afterthought. A courtesy. A checkbox. Then came Thanksgiving. The text started the Monday before. "Mom, we're doing dinner at 3 this year. Aaron's in-laws are coming later. Hope you can make it. Aaron, don't be weird, Brian. Just show up. Mom." Again, it would mean a lot to your father. Dad sent thumbs up. No apology. No mention of what happened. Just a casual expectation that I'd fall back into place like nothing had changed. Like they hadn't framed an alternate version of my entire childhood on their living room wall. I left them all on read. Thanksgiving morning, I got one more message from my mom. It was a photo. The table was already set. Crystal glasses, gold-trimmed china, centerpieces that looked straight out of a Pottery Barn catalog. And there, right in the middle, were personalized name cards in elegant cursive. One for Aaron, one for his wife, one for each of their kids, one for my parents, even one for Aaron's dog, who apparently was considered family enough to earn a seat at the table. No card for me. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd I didn't know what else to do. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just excluded, I was being edited out. In real time. Like they were actively crafting a version of this family where I had never existed. I stayed home that day, made spaghetti, and watched old sitcom reruns. Around 5:30 p.m., I got a call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. She sounded annoyed this time, not emotional. "We waited for you, Brian. Aaron told me not to, but I said we should. Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing us for trying to keep things peaceful?" That word again. Punishing. As if I was the one making things difficult. As if they hadn't rewritten my life out of existence and expected me to smile about it over mashed potatoes. That night, I went digging. I opened a folder on my hard drive labeled Old Stuff and started scrolling through pictures from the past 20 years. Real photos. The ones I had saved because they actually meant something to me. There was one of me and Aaron building a treehouse with our dad in the summer of '99. Another of all of us at my college graduation. Me holding my diploma, beaming, my mom with tears in her eyes. And there was one I had completely forgotten about, my 10th birthday party. I was in a homemade Batman costume, chocolate frosting smeared across my face, Aaron holding up a sign that said, "Happy birthday, little bro," with way too many exclamation points. I stared at that one for a long time, because it meant that once, at least once, this family had loved me, or at least pretended to. And somewhere along the way, that version of us got lost. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. A week later, I got a text from my cousin Megan. We'd always been close growing up, but drifted apart after she moved out of state. Still, we followed each other on Instagram and occasionally liked each other's stuff. Her message was short. "Megan, hey, are you okay? I saw something weird at Aunt Laura's last night." I called her immediately. Apparently, Aunt Laura had pulled out a few old photo albums while Megan was visiting. Family pictures, holidays, all that. But the thing that caught Megan's eye was that several photos had been altered. Badly. Like, she could see where the edges didn't quite match. And more importantly, she remembered me being in them. She remembered the original versions. I swear, Brian, There was this one from that Christmas at Grandma's house when we were teenagers. You and I were standing in front of the tree making goofy faces. I know you were in that photo, but when Aunt Laura showed it to me, you were gone, like you'd never been there. My blood went cold. Did you ask her about it? Yeah, Megan said, hesitant. She just kind of brushed it off. Said she didn't remember you being there, which is insane, because you were literally the one taking most of the photos that year. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the pictures on my parents' wall. It wasn't just their house. It was spreading. I think they've been giving people the edited versions, Megan said quietly, sending them out, replacing them. I hung up and immediately called another cousin, Tom, who lived nearby and had always been neutral in the family drama. I asked him if he had any old photos saved from back in the day. He did. I asked him to send me the ones from my 21st birthday party. It had been at my parents' house, back when things were still normal-ish. I remembered us all taking a big family photo in the backyard under those tacky solar lights my mom loved. He sent it. I opened the image. I wasn't in it. Not just cropped. Not just blocked by someone else. I had been removed. Cleanly. Seamlessly. Like I'd never been there. I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. What kind of person does this? What kind of family? It wasn't until 2 nights later, after a long and restless scroll through every tagged Facebook photo from the last decade, that I realized how deep it went. My mom had been quietly untagging me from group pictures. My brother had posted a Throwback Thursday collage from our childhood. Every single photo was one I remembered, but in every one, I had been replaced or removed. It wasn't just erasure. It was replacement. Aaron's kids had been photoshopped into pictures from years before they were even born. A photo of a camping trip from 2007 now showed one of his daughters holding a sparkler, despite the fact that she hadn't even existed back then. In one image, my arm was still visible, around someone's shoulders, but the face was blurred, replaced with a mismatched, pixelated version of Aaron's youngest. I started to feel nauseous. This wasn't just my family being cold. This was calculated, intentional. They weren't just pretending I didn't matter. They were actively rewriting history to pretend I never existed. The final straw came 3 days later. I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Cream cardstock, elegant calligraphy. It was from Aaron and his wife. They were renewing their vows for their 10-year anniversary. Of course, what caught my eye wasn't the invite itself. It was the photo they used. A full-color print of Aaron and his wife on their wedding day, standing under an arch of white roses. Only, that wasn't the original photo. Because I had been Aaron's best man. I had stood next to him that day, hand on his shoulder, smiling like an idiot. And in this photo, the man standing next to him was their oldest son, who had been 2 years old at the time. They'd photoshopped me out. Again, this time replacing me with someone who literally wasn't even old enough to walk down the aisle. I stood in my kitchen holding that invitation like it was a bomb. And maybe it was. Because in that moment, something in me snapped. The part of me that had tried to keep the peace. That had swallowed every slight. That had told myself, maybe they didn't mean it that way. Or, it's not worth the fight. That part of me died. They wanted me gone. They wanted to pretend I never existed. Fine. But I wasn't going quietly. I started planning something that night. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something they couldn't Photoshop their way out of. And when I was done, they were going to wish they'd just left the pictures alone. I didn't sleep the night I got that wedding invite. I just sat at my kitchen table, the card still propped against the coffee mug I never touched, staring at that photo like it might blink or speak or offer me some kind of explanation. I wasn't just erased from the picture. I was replaced. Literally overwritten by a kid who hadn't even been in preschool when the photo was taken. It felt like the final nail in a coffin I hadn't realized they'd been building for years. I'd spent most of my adult life excusing my family's behavior, downplaying it, telling myself I was just sensitive, or maybe not trying hard enough to connect, or maybe too different to really fit in. Aaron was the golden child. That was fine. Some families are like that. I could live with not being the favorite. I had built a life, had my own apartment, a steady job, friends who checked in on me. But seeing my image literally rewritten in family memories, that wasn't favoritism. That was something darker. That was exile. And for the first time, I let myself sit in the pain of that truth. Not brush it off. Not laugh it away. I let it hurt. Because it did hurt. The next few weeks were a blur. I barely got out of bed. I'd wake up late, work from home in sweatpants, barely touch food. My sleep was broken and shallow, and when I wasn't working, I was scrolling through old photos like I was trying to prove to myself I'd actually existed. I felt hollow, like a character in someone else's story who had just realized he was being written out of the plot. People noticed. My coworkers asked if I was okay. I told them I was just tired. My closest friend, Kevin, came over one Friday night and found me half asleep on the couch, surrounded by printouts of old photos like a deranged detective trying to solve his own disappearance. "What's going on, man?" he asked, nudging a stack of photos with his foot. "Did someone die?" "Yeah," I muttered, voice hoarse. "Me?" Kevin raised an eyebrow but didn't laugh. He sat down across from me and listened. Really listened. I told him everything. The photoshopped childhood, the photos on the wall, the family events where I was never invited or tagged or named. I told him about the wedding invitation, the replacement, the way no one ever apologized or acknowledged it, how they always made it my fault for pulling away. When I finished, Kevin was quiet for a long time. "Dude," he finally said, "that's not just messed up. That's pathological. Like, that's cult-level gaslighting." I let out a dry laugh. I thought I was being dramatic. "You're not. That's some Twilight Zone stuff." He looked around the room, at all the photos I had printed and laid out like a memorial service. "So what are you gonna do?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. Revenge? Disown them? Call them out? Publicly? Quietly? I was still too tangled in the grief to think straight. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. That night, after Kevin left, I opened a blank document on my laptop and started typing. Not a letter to them. Not a plan for revenge. Just my story. From the beginning. I wrote about what it was like growing up invisible. About the little slights that I used to tell myself didn't matter. About the birthday they forgot. The graduation dinner they skipped. The times they joked about me being the weird one. I wrote about the photos. The edits. The silence. And I kept writing. Every night. Until my fingers ached and my mind emptied. It was the first thing that made me feel like me again. Like I was taking my identity back, sentence by sentence. In the following weeks, I started reclaiming other parts of my life too. I cleaned my apartment top to bottom. I got a haircut, bought a new desk, rearranged the furniture. I deleted the family group chat from my phone, blocked my mom and Aaron on social media. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I needed space to breathe. I also started therapy. It had been a long time coming. I'd always made excuses, too expensive, too time-consuming, not for me. But the truth was, I was scared to sit with the things I'd buried. Scared to hear that maybe I had done something to deserve the way I was treated. But my therapist, a quiet, observant woman named Michelle, didn't let me go there. "You don't need to earn basic dignity," she said in one of our first sessions. "You don't have to perform to be worthy of love." That sentence cracked something in me. Over the next few months, I learned how to speak about my pain without minimizing it. I learned that boundaries weren't cruel, that it was okay to walk away from people who chose to harm you, even if they shared your DNA. I started going for long walks after work, letting my thoughts drift without dragging me under. I rediscovered my love for photography, real photography, not the kind that deletes people. I started shooting cityscapes at dusk, portraits of strangers at the park, candid shots of street performers. I created an Instagram account to share my work anonymously. Within a few weeks, it started gaining traction. One photo in particular, an old man sitting alone on a bench, silhouetted by the orange glow of a street lamp, got reposted by a local art page. It exploded. People commented about how haunting and beautiful it was. Someone said it felt like a visual poem about grief and healing. They didn't know how right they were. That photo became my profile picture, not because it was popular, but because it reminded me that I still had a story to tell, that I was still in the picture, even if others tried to crop me out. Then, one afternoon, an email popped up that stopped me cold. Subject line, Family Archive, request for photo submissions. It was from my Aunt Laura. Apparently, she and a few other relatives were putting together a digital memory book for Grandma's 80th birthday. They were asking everyone to submit old family photos and stories to compile into a slideshow for the party. I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it, to delete it, and keep moving forward with my new, quiet life. But then I thought about the photos they'd already collected, the ones Aaron and my parents had probably submitted. I thought about how this archive might become the record, the version of our family history that would live on. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't do something, they'd win. So I started going through my hard drive again. But this time, I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was curating my version of the story. I pulled together photos they couldn't have deleted, ones I had taken on my own camera, or where I was the only person in the shot. I included goofy selfies with my cousins, behind-the-scenes photos from family trips, pictures of me and Grandma baking cookies in her old kitchen, flowers smudged on our faces, photos that proved I'd been there, that I'd mattered. I even included one photo from Aaron's wedding, the original version, where I was standing right next to him, beaming in my ill-fitting suit, holding the ring box. I labeled it Best Man 2013, and I wrote captions for all of them. Not snarky, not petty, just truthful. This was the summer we all went camping. Aaron and I fought over who would pitch the tent faster. I won. This was my college graduation. Mom said she was proud of me that day. This was my 10th birthday. Batman party. Grandma made the cake. I ate 3 slices and got sick. Worth it. I uploaded all of them to the shared drive. 3 days later, I got a message from Aunt Laura. Aunt Laura, thank you for sending these, Brian. Some of them brought me to tears. I'd forgotten how much you were part of everything. Another message followed. Megan, saw your photos. Thank you. I knew I wasn't crazy. The slideshow went live a week later. I wasn't at the party. I hadn't been invited. But Megan sent me a video of the slideshow playing on a screen in Grandma's living room. I watched as image after image filled the screen. Photos of me, laughing, building, celebrating, growing. The music was soft. The mood, nostalgic. And then came the wedding photo. The original. I watched as Aaron's face visibly stiffened in the video. His jaw clenched. His wife leaned over and whispered something. My mom looked away. Good. They weren't the only ones with the power to shape a narrative. I never got a direct message from Aaron. Or my parents. No apology. No explanation. But I didn't need one anymore. Because something had shifted. They wanted me gone. But I had reclaimed my place. Not by begging to be included. By proving I'd always been there. Still, this wasn't the end. Because while they were busy pretending I was invisible, I was quietly planning something they would never be able to ignore. I waited. Not for an apology. By now, I knew that wasn't coming. What I waited for was clarity. Not emotional, but strategic. Revenge wasn't about explosions, or yelling matches, or big dramatic gestures. It was about timing. Precision. Letting the truth slip into a space so public, so undeniable, that even the most manipulative people couldn't distort it anymore. And after reclaiming my own identity piece by piece, through my art, through therapy, through reconnecting with relatives who did remember me, I finally had the clarity I needed. I started with research. I began compiling timelines. I made a spreadsheet, not out of obsession, but necessity. Every family event I remembered being at. Every photo that proved it. Every altered version I had evidence of. I cataloged them all. The original photo from my 10th birthday party with me in it, and the one Aaron had posted last year where I'd been replaced by one of his kids. The college graduation my parents said they barely remembered attending, despite the video I had of my dad giving a toast. The family vacation in 2006 where my brother now claimed I didn't come because I was off sulking somewhere, except there I was, in my cousin's scrapbook, helping build the bonfire. And most importantly, I kept track of who had shared or reshared the edited versions. Aunt Laura, Uncle Rick, my mother, Aaron, all of them had either reposted altered images or participated in this narrative rewrite. But I also tracked the ones who hadn't. My cousin Megan, for one. She'd become an unexpected lifeline, texting me regularly with updates, screenshots, things she overheard. She had screenshots of the family group chat where my mom would talk about me in third person, like I wasn't even in the room. It's best we don't invite Brian this year. He always makes things uncomfortable. Aaron's worried about the energy Brian brings. We're trying to keep things light. Let's not include him in the memory book photos, okay? We want it to be positive. Positive. That word again. It burned. Megan also found something else. Apparently, Aaron had started telling people I'd distanced myself from the family after a nervous breakdown. Not because of their treatment, not because I was being actively erased from every corner of our shared history, but because I was emotionally unstable. That was the push I needed. So I reached out to the last person I ever thought I'd call again, Grandma. She was 80 now, sharp as ever, but quiet. She'd always been diplomatic in family matters, the type to mediate instead of take sides. But she was also sentimental. She kept boxes and boxes of photos. Real ones, untouched, unfiltered. Photos my parents probably hadn't touched yet. I called her and asked if I could come visit. She sounded surprised, but warm. "I'd love that," she said. "It's been too long." I drove the next weekend. She lived in a small town just a few hours away, and when I got there, she greeted me with a frail hug and watery eyes. "You look just like your grandfather," she said, touching my cheek. We had tea, talked about nothing at first, then about the family. I treaded carefully until I saw the old album on her coffee table. I asked if I could look through it. She handed it over. There I was, page after page, smiling, awkward, teenage me, holding sparklers, helping in the garden. Even Aaron and I, arm in arm, at his engagement party. There was no denying it. I'd been there. I'd mattered. And now I had the proof. Undisputable. Tangible. "Grandma," I said softly, "do you know that some of these photos are different online?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" I showed her. My phone. Side-by-side comparisons. Original versus edited. The cropped birthday photos. The wedding picture. My literal deletion. Her hands shook a little as she held the phone. "They did this?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "They did." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You should tell people." I paused. "You think so?" "I know so," she said. "It's time someone did." So I began. First, I secured digital copies of Grandma's photos. She even helped me scan some of them. We laughed at how bad some of the old shots were. Her printer jammed 3 times, and we ended up eating frozen pizza on TV trays like it was 2002 again. For a moment, it felt like family was a real thing again. Not a lie, not a performance. Once I had everything, I sat down to build what I came to call the archive. Not for the public. Not yet. For now, it was a personal project. A Dropbox folder with clear labels. Originals. Edited versions, collected. Side-by-sides. Video evidence. Voice memos, from Grandma, Megan. I even made a timeline document. It was clinical, almost cold. Exact dates, image names, who shared what, where, and when. No commentary. Just facts. The pattern was clear. Over the last 6 years, I had been systematically scrubbed from the family history by Aaron, my parents, and, whether knowingly or not, a few others. With this archive built, I now needed the moment. The spark. The perfect time to expose it. Not just for vindication, but for impact. I didn't want to scream it into the void. I wanted the truth to hit the exact people who'd spent years pretending I was nothing. And that's when fate handed me a golden opportunity. Megan texted me a screenshot. Aaron and his wife were planning a family legacy video, a slick, edited documentary-style project to celebrate my parents' 40th anniversary. They'd hired a professional videographer, were collecting stories from relatives, and planned to play the final cut at a massive garden party in June. They were inviting extended family from all over the country. The whole thing was going to be recorded. It was perfect. I didn't tell Megan my full plan. Just asked if she could get me access to the videographer. She said she'd try. A few days later, she sent me his contact info. "Don't say I gave it to you," she wrote. "But he's chill. Just tell him you're part of the family and want to contribute a segment." So I did. I reached out as Brian, Aaron's younger brother, and asked if I could record a message for the video tribute. I said I wanted to celebrate our parents in my own way. The guy was polite. "Sure, man, just shoot something horizontal and email it to me. I'll slot it in." I recorded 2 versions. Version 1, sweet, clean, emotional. The one I knew they expected. Version 2, the truth. Not a rant. Not a tantrum. Just a calm, steady voiceover with visuals. It started with a photo of me and Aaron at age 7, playing in the backyard. Then a caption, "This photo never made it into the family slideshow." Then the side-by-side shots. Me present in the original. Gone in the new. I included timestamps. Metadata. Grandma's voice reading off old dates. Megan's quiet voice confirming who was actually present at what events. I even played a screen recording of Aaron's Facebook post from 2 years ago, with my smiling face replaced by his toddler daughter in Photoshop. Then I ended it with this. "You can crop me out of the pictures. You can rewrite stories and replace faces. But you don't get to rewrite me. I was there. I am part of this family. And no amount of editing will change that." I attached the file. Sent it off. But I didn't stop there. I also uploaded the full archive to a private site I built in one weekend. Simple design, password protected, titled The Family They Forgot. I sent the password to 3 people: Megan, Grandma, and, just for fun, Aunt Laura. A week before the anniversary party, Megan texted me a single sentence: "They're panicking." Apparently, the videographer had included the wrong version in the final draft. Whether by mistake or as a quiet act of rebellion, I still don't know. But the moment they previewed the video, Aaron and my parents flipped. They tried to get it pulled, tried to reschedule a re-edit. But it was too late. The files had been submitted. The venue was booked. The guests had RSVP'd. They couldn't cancel without raising questions. They could only brace themselves. And I waited. Calm. Steady. Because I knew the moment was coming. The one where the masks would finally crack. Where they'd have to watch the world see exactly what they'd tried so hard to erase. And when that day arrived, I'd be ready. The garden party was set for a warm Saturday afternoon in early June. The sky stretched cloudless above a rented event space that my parents and Aaron had booked just outside their town. A place with white gazebos, neatly trimmed hedges, a string quartet, and round tables decked in soft gold linens. It was supposed to be perfect. A celebration of family legacy. A 40-year anniversary. Grandparents smiling for photos, kids running on the grass, catered food with little name cards. The kind of event where every detail screamed togetherness. Love. Unity. Except this time, the pictures couldn't lie. Not anymore. I didn't attend the event. I debated it, but ultimately, I wanted the moment to be theirs. Their show. Their stage. I didn't need to be physically present for the truth to land where it needed to. My absence would speak for itself, especially when the video played. Megan had agreed to record it for me. Not just the reaction, but the entire moment. The build-up, the expressions, the fallout. She positioned her phone carefully, muting the sound until the video segment began. She even brought a friend who pretended to be one of the photographers, letting her move freely between tables to capture the audience's reactions. The final video was 20 minutes long, and I watched every second. It began with a cheerful montage. Pictures of my parents in the 80s, dancing at their wedding, holding Aaron as a baby. Guests clapped politely, sipping champagne. The music swelled with nostalgia. People smiled, whispered fondly to each other. Then came the next sequence. Our family, through the years. That's when it shifted. The first few photos played as expected. Aaron's birthdays, my parents in front of the old family home. But about 3 minutes in, the screen went black. Then, a single photo. Me and Aaron, ages 7 and 10, holding water guns in the backyard. Unedited. The caption appeared in white font. This photo never made it into the family slideshow. There was a pause. Then the next image, the edited version. The one where I'd been cropped out completely. The audience murmured, confused. Then more, side-by-side comparisons. My face erased. My arm still visible. Whole scenes rewritten. The captions were neutral, almost documentary style. Original, 2006 family camping trip. Edited version posted in 2021. Figure on the left replaced digitally. A few heads turned. Aaron, seated at the front table, visibly stiffened. My mother leaned toward him and whispered something, her hand clutching her pearls. Then my voice came on. Calm, clear, measured. Not angry, not vengeful, just honest. I spoke over a slow pan of childhood photos. My name is Brian. I'm the youngest son of the couple being celebrated today. Some of you may not recognize me, and that's no accident. For the past several years, I've been gradually erased from our family's collective memory, removed from photographs, cropped out of narratives, replaced, or simply deleted. I'm not here to cause drama. I just want to share the version of this family you weren't shown. Gasps. Quiet coughs. The clinking of forks stopped. I showed more images. A video clip of Aaron's wedding where I stood beside him. Then the altered version they'd used for their vow renewal, where his son stood in my place. I timed it perfectly. As I spoke about being replaced, the frame froze on that specific swap. My face gone, his child photoshopped in, the lighting not even matched. I watched Aaron's face in the recording. He looked like a man watching his house collapse in slow motion. His wife shifted uncomfortably. My dad closed his eyes. My mom stared at the screen with a rigid smile that cracked at the edges. Then came the final segment. Photos of me and Grandma. Me with Megan. A clip of my cousin Tom saying, "Of course Brian was there." He took this photo, pointing to a group picture where I had been erased. And then Grandma's voice, trembling but firm, reading a quote from a letter she wrote me just 2 weeks prior. Every family has a choice between truth and comfort, between love and control. I'm sorry I stayed silent so long. You were always part of this family, and you always will be. I closed the video with one final image. Me, standing alone in the backyard last fall, holding a framed photo of my 10th birthday, the real one. Caption: I was always there. You just stopped looking. The screen faded to black. Silence. No music. No applause. Just stunned, awkward silence. In Megan's video, you could see people start shifting in their chairs. A few guests glanced at Aaron, then at my parents. Some whispered. Aunt Laura looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Uncle Rick took a long sip of wine. One of Aaron's friends actually got up and walked outside. Then came the whispers, the tension, and finally, the fallout. I found out later that the rest of the party went off script. The planned speeches were cut. My dad sat quietly for the remainder, barely speaking. My mom tried to laugh it off, tried to joke that Brian's always been theatrical. But people weren't buying it. Megan told me that 3 different relatives approached her privately to ask if the photos were real. She showed them the site, the side-by-sides, the dates. They couldn't deny it. The truth was out. But I wasn't done. The next morning, I updated the private archive to be public. I added a disclaimer at the top. This is not about shaming. This is about remembering what's true. Then I sent the link to every guest who had attended the party. Politely. Just so they could see the full story for themselves. I didn't call anyone out by name. I didn't need to. Within 48 hours, Aaron deactivated his Facebook. 3 days later, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. Aaron, you win. Hope you're happy. I didn't respond. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about being seen. Megan told me that my parents are taking a break from social events. Apparently, a few longtime family friends pulled away. Quietly. My mom stopped posting family photos altogether. My dad hasn't spoken to Grandma since the party. She's fine with that. I think I finally stood for something, she said to me on a call. Feels good, actually. As for me, I moved cities. Got a new job in a bigger firm. One that respects balance and leaves room for passion projects. My photography took off too. After the story of my edited childhood went mildly viral on a local blog, people started asking about my work. I even booked a small solo gallery show. The theme? The ones who stayed in frame. I'm still in touch with Megan. Grandma too. Occasionally, a cousin reaches out and thanks me for saying what they were too afraid to. But mostly, I'm just living, breathing easier. And I've started taking family photos again. Only this time, I'm the one holding the camera. And the final shot? It's always honest. You can erase a face from a photo, but you can't erase the truth from the people who lived it. I'm James, 28, and if you'd told me even a year ago that my own family would try to treat me like a walking ATM, I would have laughed. Not because they were perfect, far from it, but because I genuinely thought we were past all the petty manipulation. After all, I'd been out of the house for 6 years, had a decent job, paid my own bills, helped out here and there when someone needed it. But what happened at my dad's retirement party opened my eyes to just how twisted their expectations had become, and how little they saw me as a person rather than a provider. My dad had always been a proud man. Former military, strict, by-the-book kind of guy. He married my mom young, had my sister and me 2 years apart, and then, right after I turned 10, left us. Just walked out. Claimed he couldn't breathe in our house anymore. My mom cried for weeks. I still remember hiding behind the couch the day he came back to pack up his things, and how he didn't even look at me as he hauled box after box out the door. A year later, he was married to Angie, the woman he'd been just friends with at the office. And from then on, we saw him 2 weekends a month, if that. Fast forward almost 2 decades, and somehow I'd convinced myself to let it all go. Time dulls things, or maybe I just got tired of carrying it. I saw a therapist. I stopped blaming myself for things that were never mine to fix, and I learned how to live without needing anything from him. Still, we stayed in touch. Polite texts, holiday invites, the occasional awkward lunch. It was a fragile piece, but I didn't push it. So when I got the invite to his retirement party, mailed in an actual envelope, no less, I told myself I should go. Maybe it'd be a moment of closure. A celebration of him finally letting go of the job that had made him so absent. Maybe we could start again, in some small way. The party was at their house, a large, two-story place Angie inherited from her father. They'd renovated it a few years back, and it looked like something out of a home decor magazine. Everything was beige and symmetrical, with decorative pillows that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I arrived a few minutes early, which was a mistake. The only people there were Angie, my dad, and my half-sister, Lily, who was 24 and had the personality of a condescending life coach. James. Angie greeted me with that too-wide smile she always used, like she was pretending to be excited for the cameras. You look corporate. Lily giggled. That blazer is giving serious mid-level manager energy. I smiled through it. Nice to see you too. Dad came over, gave me a firm, awkward pat on the back. Glad you could make it, son. Big day. I nodded. Congrats. Retirement's a big deal. Oh, it's more than that. Angie chimed in, practically bouncing. It's the start of a new chapter. For all of us. I didn't ask what she meant. I probably should have. Guests trickled in. Former coworkers, some old neighbors, even a few of my dad's golfing buddies who gave off the exact same stiff energy he did. The whole thing was oddly formal. Champagne flutes, catered food, some guy playing soft piano in the corner like we were at a fundraiser. I kept my distance, sipped my drink, smiled when spoken to. Tried not to feel like the only outsider in the house I used to visit as a teenager, always under the unspoken rule. Don't touch anything, don't speak unless spoken to, and be grateful you're invited. Then came the speech. Angie tapped her glass with a fork and announced that my dad had a few words. He stood at the front of the room, flanked by a banner that read, "Congratulations, Richard," in tasteful gold letters. He cleared his throat and began with the usual. Thank you for coming. It's been a great 40 years, honored to serve, blah blah. Then he smiled, not warmly, but in that rehearsed, calculated way I'd seen 100 times. As I step into retirement, he said, I've given a lot of thought to what this new phase of life should look like. And it's clear that in order to truly enjoy it, we need to make sure the household remains stable, supported, and unified. I blinked. Unified? He continued, which is why, after careful planning and discussion, we've decided that moving forward, each of our working children, that is, James and Lily, will contribute 30% of their monthly income toward the household. It's only fair. At first, I honestly thought I misheard him. I laughed, a small, confused laugh, waiting for the punchline. Lily clapped. Angie looked around the room like she'd just announced she was running for office. And my dad? He held up a manila folder, opened it, and pulled out a stapled document. It's all outlined here, he said, walking toward me. Standard agreement. Nothing crazy. Just sign it, and we'll set up the transfers. First one starts next month. The room was quiet, but not uncomfortable, more like expectant, as if everyone there already knew this was coming. I took the folder from his hand, opened it, and scanned the first few lines. My full name, an actual payment schedule, terms like non-negotiable contribution, and even a late fee clause. I looked up slowly, every muscle in my face tightening. You're serious? I said quietly. Dad nodded. Dead serious. We've done a lot for you, James. This is about respect. About supporting the people who raised you. Raised me. I repeated, my voice low. You left when I was 10. He looked annoyed. Don't be dramatic. Something snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just took the contract in both hands, tore it down the middle, and let it fall to the floor. Then I walked out. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just the sound of Angie's shocked gasp behind me. I drove home in silence. My hands shook the whole way, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of it. Who does that? What kind of parent throws a party just to publicly ambush their child with financial demands? When I finally got back to my apartment, I tossed my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then it didn't stop. Calls. Voicemails. Texts. At some point I put it on silent and shoved it under a pillow. The next morning, I woke up to 46 missed calls. My dad. Angie. Lily. Even some random cousin who never talked to me. The group chat I forgot I was in had over 200 unread messages. The first one I opened said, You seriously embarrassed Dad. After everything he's done for you. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding, fingers cold, and that was the moment it hit me. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. And I was done playing that role. I didn't reply. Not at first. I sat there for a long time, just rereading that message. After everything he's done for you. What exactly had he done? Left my mom and me with no support for years? Skipped every school performance, every football game, every birthday after the age of 10? Sent me gift cards on Christmas like he was checking something off a list? And yet somehow, in their narrative, I owed him. I spent that Sunday in a strange haze, pacing, thinking, replaying the moment with the contract over and over in my head. It wasn't just the request that stunned me. It was how choreographed it all felt. Angie's proud expression, Lily's smug grin, the way the guests didn't even look surprised. It felt like a trap I was supposed to walk into smiling. And when I didn't, I became the villain. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Lily. Grow up. You make more than enough to help. Or do you just hate Dad that much? I stared at it for a while. Then I typed a reply. You want help? Get a job that doesn't involve buying leggings and posting about green juice. I didn't hit send. Not because it wasn't true. It was. But because I realized something in that moment. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me angry, impulsive, chasing their approval or lashing out so they could play the victims. That was the pattern. That's what they'd always done. So I deleted the message. Instead, I did something better. I called my accountant. Let me back up a bit. A few years ago, I started freelancing on the side, web development, branding, a little consulting here and there. It started small, but it grew. Eventually, I formed an LLC, and with it came an accountant, Marcus, who was one of those dry, brilliant people who could find tax loopholes like it was a game. He'd once helped me legally classify a standing desk as a mobility aid because of lower back pain. The man was a wizard. When I told him the story, he was quiet for a beat, then said, "That's not normal, James." Yeah, no kidding. Do you want me to make sure nothing's connected to them financially? Joint accounts, beneficiary clauses, any kind of dependent listings? I hadn't even thought of that. But now that he mentioned it, yeah, I said, check everything. That kicked off what I now call phase 1. I started digging. Old bank accounts, insurance policies, even my online tax filings. And what I found stunned me. Somewhere along the line, when I was fresh out of college and still half naive about how the world worked, my dad had added himself as a backup emergency contact and authorized correspondent for my health insurance. It wasn't financial power, but it gave him the ability to request records. I never signed anything. Or if I did, it must have been buried in some paperwork I filled out while still under his roof when I briefly stayed with him after a layoff. I had Marcus help me revoke everything. Every name, every trace. Gone. Meanwhile, the group chat was still on fire. Apparently, the story going around was that I'd stormed out in a rage and humiliated the family in front of guests. No mention of the contract, of course. Just how sensitive I was. How ungrateful. How Dad was just trying to teach responsibility. And then came the real kicker, a message from Angie. We're going to give you a few days to calm down. But this is still happening, James. It's time to start acting like part of a family. There it was. The ultimatum. Veiled, but unmistakable. That night, I started writing something I never thought I'd need. A formal letter of no contact. I wasn't planning to send it just yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go nuclear. But it helped me think clearly. Putting it in words forced me to really see the pattern. The way they only reached out when they needed something. The way any boundary I set was seen as a betrayal. How family only mattered when it benefited them. But I wasn't done yet. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. We'd always been close. She was quiet, thoughtful, the type of person who never raised her voice but could cut to the heart of things with one sentence. I got a call from your father, she said. He says you're refusing to support him in retirement. I sighed. Mom, he tried to make me sign a contract. At his party, he literally passed it out like a menu. There was a pause. Then, softly, that man never changes. I asked if she'd ever experienced anything like this back when they were married. She laughed, dry and humorless. Oh, sweetie. When I got pregnant with Lily, he wanted me to go half on prenatal vitamins. Said he didn't eat them, so why should he pay? That was all I needed to hear. The next part of the story wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about preparing for it. I wasn't going to yell or argue or play their game. I was going to show them exactly what life looked like when the resource they thought they owned decided to walk away. But before I could do that, I received something unexpected in the mail, a certified letter sent express. Inside, a copy of the contract I tore in half, taped together. with a new signature line and a post-it note from my dad that said, "You have until the 15th." I stared at it for a long time, not angry, just cold. And that's when I made the decision. If they wanted to make this official, fine. So would I? The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. Every time I walked past it, I half expected it to burst into flames. There was something so brazen about it, like they thought if they taped the pieces back together, everything else would magically reattach too. Trust, respect, the years we never talked about. But this wasn't about nostalgia or family anymore. This was about ownership, and they thought they still had a claim to me. I scanned the letter and emailed a copy to Marcus. His reply came that same afternoon. Legally unenforceable. Ethically disgusting. Want me to write a response? I told him to hold off for now, because this wasn't just about legality anymore. It was personal, and if they wanted to make it official, I'd treat it like a hostile business transaction. Cold, calculated, surgical. So I began phase 2. The first thing I did was block them, not forever, but enough to get their attention. Dad, Angie, Lily. Socials, phone, even email. Silence. Not a word of explanation. No angry message. No warning. Just absence. Like a switch had flipped and the power line went dead. Next, I pulled up the shared drive Dad and I used back when I'd helped him digitize his old photos and military records. Back then, he claimed he didn't trust the cloud, so he made me upload everything onto my account. He never bothered to make backups. So I downloaded everything, zipped it into a private archive, and deleted his access. Was it petty? Maybe. But it was the first time in my life I stopped feeling like I had to be the bigger person. And you know what? It felt good. The real blow came a week later. Through a mutual contact, one of Dad's old co-workers who'd always liked me more than him, I learned that Dad had planned his retirement finances assuming I'd contribute. He hadn't saved properly. No pension beyond the basics. Angie had quit her job 3 years ago to focus on interior wellness, which I guess meant painting inspirational quotes on walls and taking bubble baths with herbal salts. And Lily? She hadn't paid a single utility bill in her life. Apparently, she still lived in the guest house rent-free and called it her creative sanctuary. According to the coworker, Dad had even floated the idea of co-signing a small business loan for her, for an online coaching course she hadn't even designed yet. It was like watching a slow-motion financial car crash. And I was supposed to be the airbag. When the 15th came and went, I waited. No payment, obviously. No response, either. Not that they could reach me. But the silence had a tension to it, like the breath before the punch. And I knew my dad too well. He wasn't going to accept this quietly. He wasn't used to not getting his way. Sure enough, the next wave hit on the 17th. A letter arrived. Not from Dad. From his lawyer. I opened it with shaking hands. Not because I was scared, but because I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go. Inside was a formal demand for contribution, citing oral agreements, familial duty, and even emotional restitution. Marcus called me 5 minutes after I forwarded him the scan. "This is laughable," he said. "They're bluffing. They want to scare you into complying." Can I respond? I asked. Do you want to? I paused. Then, yeah, but not with words. What came next was a bit of a project. Over the next few days, I compiled every receipt, every bank transfer, every gift and donation I'd given them over the last 10 years. Rent I covered when Lily forgot. Repairs I paid for after Dad's water heater burst. Groceries, gas, medical co-pays when Angie's back went out, and she insisted insurance is too complicated. I made a spreadsheet, labeled everything, added dates, amounts, notes, color-coded it. The total? $42,713.17. And that didn't even count the unpaid tech work, car rides, or emotional labor. But I kept it clean, precise, professional. Then I drafted my own letter, with Marcus's help, but all in my voice. It started like this. Dear Dad, since you have decided to treat our relationship as a financial contract rather than a familial one, I've outlined my prior contributions to this household for clarity. You'll find the itemized list enclosed. If you believe it's appropriate to formalize our relationship into one of debtor and creditor, please let me know. I'd be happy to begin negotiations for repayment of the outstanding balance. Otherwise, consider this my final word on the matter. I didn't send it right away. I let it sit in a draft folder for 2 days. And then, just as I was about to print it out and put it in the mail, something unexpected happened. Lily showed up, unannounced, at my apartment. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in high-end athleisure, holding a soy latte in one hand and a reusable shopping bag in the other. Her hair was perfect. Her expression wasn't. "What are you doing here?" I asked flat. She pushed past me without waiting. "You're being so dramatic." I closed the door behind her, slowly. "You just showed up at my home without calling. That's dramatic." She spun around, clearly annoyed. "Dad is losing it. He hasn't slept in 3 days. Angie's talking about selling the house. You have to fix this." I stared at her. "Fix what?" "This mess," she snapped. "This thing you've started. Just pay what he asked. It's not that hard." I laughed, quietly, bitterly. "You realize he tried to bill me for being his son, right?" She rolled her eyes. "It's not about that. It's about loyalty. Family." "No, it's about money," I said, walking past her. "And I'm done pretending it isn't." "You think you're above us now?" she spat. "Just because you live in a fancy building and make 6 figures?" "No," I said, turning to face her. "I think I've just stopped letting guilt buy silence." She opened her mouth to say something else, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, went pale, and without another word, stormed out. I didn't know what the message said, but whatever it was, it changed her. The letter went out the next day. Certified. Tracked. I watched the delivery confirmation come through that Friday at 3:43 p.m. And for the next 72 hours, silence. Until Monday morning, when I got the call from my dad's lawyer. And the first words out of his mouth were, "He's considering legal action." I took the call in my kitchen, staring out the window while the lawyer on the other end tried to sound professional and intimidating at the same time. He spoke slowly, as if expecting me to panic, to beg for leniency. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "your father has asked me to inform you that unless you agree to the terms outlined in the household contribution contract by the end of this week, he is considering pursuing legal action." I let him finish. Then I asked, calmly, "Legal action for what exactly?" "For declining to pay an arbitrary fee to a man who abandoned his parental responsibilities 2 decades ago." There was a pause. He must have realized I wasn't going to be easy. "Well, he claims there was an oral agreement made in good faith that you would support him and his family upon his retirement." I actually laughed. "Good faith," I said. "He ambushed me with a contract at his retirement party like it was a wedding proposal, in front of guests, with a fake smile and a legal document in a folder. And you're telling me I acted in bad faith?" He tried to salvage the call. "It's not uncommon for adult children to assist their parents financially." "Correct," I interrupted. "And it's also not uncommon for those parents to have earned that support through decades of love, stability, and presence, which he didn't provide. You want to talk good faith? I've paid over 40 grand helping them over the years, and I have the records. So if you want to talk about financial burdens, I can make this very expensive for them in return." The call ended shortly after that. Marcus called me a few hours later, sounding unusually energized. "Just got the transcript. He has no case. I even checked to see if there were any precedents involving family contribution contracts. The only examples that even remotely come close involve parents providing sustained support to an adult child, not the other way around." "So what now?" I asked. "Now," Marcus said. "Now we wait. And if he tries anything, we file a cease and desist. If he keeps pushing, we go for harassment. Your father's all bark, no bite. This is him trying to bluff his way back into control. And for once, I wasn't scared of that bark. Because I knew the truth. He needed me. Not for love. Not for connection. Just for money. I was a line item in his retirement budget that had suddenly gone missing, and now the entire equation was falling apart. A few days passed. No calls. No letters. But the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a storm. Then, on Thursday, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know I messed up. Please, let's talk." It was Lily. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anything when I saw her name. Not guilt. Not obligation. Just tired. Still, I replied. "What changed?" She answered almost immediately. "Dad and Angie are selling the house. The mortgage is bigger than he said. And they used part of Mom's life insurance for Lily's coaching brand. They thought you'd help cover the difference." I blinked. Mom's life insurance? My mom, who passed away 3 years ago, had a modest policy. When she passed, she left me a handwritten note and a locked box with a few things she wanted me to have. She never mentioned leaving money to them. But if they had access to it, I made another call to her old financial advisor. He remembered me. Yes, James, I remember. Your mother's policy was small, but very clear. You were the sole beneficiary. But shortly after her passing, your father submitted paperwork indicating that he was still her legal spouse. It delayed the payout for months. Wait, but they were divorced. Correct. But your mother never updated her policy. Because of that, there was a legal dispute. Your father received 40%. You received the rest. I sat there stunned. 40%. That must have been 10,000, maybe 12. He spent it on Lily's coaching business. I felt something deep in my chest harden. That was my mother's final gift to me, the last tangible part of her life. And they siphoned part of it away like it was a stray coin they found in a couch cushion. That night, I typed out a final message and sent it to Lily. I'm sorry things are falling apart, but I am not responsible for the decisions Dad made or the ones you benefited from. I am not your safety net. I am not your bailout. I am not your backup plan. I am your brother, and that used to mean something. But if you and Dad and Angie continue to treat me like a wallet with a pulse, then this is the last conversation we'll ever have. I truly hope you figure things out. She didn't reply. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't hear from any of them again until the email came. It was short, just 3 sentences. From Angie, we've sold the house, moving into a rental. Richard is not doing well. I hope you're proud of what you've done. No greeting, no signature, just passive-aggressive bitterness wrapped in faux sincerity. I didn't reply because the truth is, I wasn't proud. I wasn't happy. This wasn't satisfying revenge or some grand triumph. It was tragic. A family that chose money over connection, ego over love, control over kindness. But I was relieved. Relieved to finally have clarity, to have proof that walking away was the right decision. That no matter how much they huffed and puffed and threw their titles around, dad, stepmom, sister, they never truly acted like family. Not when it counted. And so I moved on. I kept building my business, traveled more, reconnected with people who actually valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Therapy helped. So did time. 1 year later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card. Just 3 words, written in a shaky hand. You were right. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. I still don't know what made him send it. Pride, guilt, desperation. Maybe all 3. But I didn't need anything from him anymore. Because the contract was never real. But the boundary I built, that was. And it still stands.